multiverse is a tapestry of infinite realities, each with its own immutable laws. But what happens when a thread from one universe tears through into another, bringing power that shouldn't exist? When a being of hope crashes into a world built on blood and damnation, reality itself must decide which rules will bend and which will break. London burned, not the clean, cauterizing fire of civilization's forge, but the wet, screaming fire of bodies igniting from the inside out. The Thames reflected orange and red, a river of flame mirrored in water that would soon run darker still. Big Ben's face cracked as something massive slammed into its foundation, and the iconic clock tower groaned like a dying giant. Clark Kent, Superman, had been fighting Darkseid's parademons over Metropolis when the sky tore. Not opened, not portaled, tore. Like fabric ripped by clumsy hands, reality had split with an audible scream that existed in frequencies both above and below human hearing. The rift was wrong. Not the clean geometry of a boom tube or the swirling energy of a magical gateway, but a jagged wound that bled colors that had no names. Superman had felt himself pulled through before he could even process what was happening. Darkseid's omega beams missing him by inches as dimensions folded him away from everything he knew. He'd emerged 30 feet above the Thames, disoriented and already cataloging his surroundings with superhuman efficiency. Late 20th century architecture, English signage. Night, approximately 11:47 p.m. based on stellar positions and Big Ben's damaged face. Smoke rising from at least 40 different points across the city. Screaming. So much screaming. And the smell. Superman had fought in wars, pulled survivors from collapsed buildings, faced world-ending threats that left cities in ruins. He knew the scent of death. But this was something else. Something that made his Kryptonian biology recoil on an instinctual level he didn't fully understand. It smelled like meat left to rot in a freezer, like copper and sulfur and something underneath that his enhanced senses couldn't quite identify. Something wrong. He'd descended into the Southwark district, following the densest concentration of screams, and found hell had come to Earth. They'd been human once. Superman could see that in the torn remnants of clothing, in the shape of faces twisted into something that howled with hunger rather than pain. But they moved wrong. Joints bending at angles that would shatter bone, fingers elongated into claws that tore through flesh like tissue paper. Dozens of them swarmed through the street, pulling people from cars and homes, and the sounds the victims made would haunt him. Superman didn't hesitate. He moved at a speed that turned him into a blue and red blur, catching a creature mid-lunge and hurling it through a brick wall with enough force to crater the masonry. Another turned toward him with eyes that glowed like hot coals, jaw unhinging impossibly wide. And Superman's heat vision lanced out, twin beams of concentrated solar energy that should have incinerated anything biological. The creature's head exploded, then regenerated. Flesh bubbling up from the ruined neck, reforming around bone that knit itself back together in seconds. It laughed, a wet, gurgling sound, and charged. What the hell? Superman caught it by the throat, frost forming across its gray skin as his freeze breath locked it in a prison of ice. He turned to the next threat, then the next, moving faster than human eyes could track. Ice prison, wall impact, heat vision, every move calculated to incapacitate rather than kill, because whatever these things were, they'd been human once. And there had to be a way to save them, to cure them, to... A woman screamed. Not the scream of terror, but the scream of someone dying badly. Superman's head snapped around, and he saw one of the creatures hunched over a prone figure in an alley, and even his speed wasn't enough to prevent what happened next. By the time he'd crossed the distance and hurled the monster away, the woman was already convulsing, her neck torn open, eyes rolling back. "Hold on," Superman said, applying pressure to the wound, his voice steady despite the ice forming in his gut. "I've got you. You're going to be..." Her eyes opened. They glowed red. Her hand shot up and grabbed his wrist with strength that actually made him blink in surprise, and her face began to shift, becoming something pale and hungry and wrong. Superman jerked back, horror dawning. The wound was healing. She was changing. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no." The sound of clapping echoed through the blood-soaked street. Slow, deliberate, mocking. Superman turned, floating up to scan the area, and found the source standing atop an overturned double-decker bus. A man. Tall. Impossibly tall. Perhaps 6'5" or more. Dressed in red, a long coat that seemed to drink in the firelight, Alucard, wide-brimmed hat casting shadows across a face that wore a smile too wide, too sharp. Long black hair framed features that were handsome in the way a serpent might be handsome. And when the figure tilted his head, Superman saw teeth. "How delightful," the man said, voice cultured and ancient and amused. "A hero, a real hero with a cape and everything. Tell me, do you do children's parties? The little ones do so love a show before they die screaming." The creatures, the ghouls, parted around him like a sea, and Superman realized with a chill that they were afraid of this man. Whatever he was, even these monsters recognized something more terrible. "Who are you?" Superman demanded, fists clenched. "What have you done to these people?" The man in red laughed, a sound like coffin lids sliding open. "Done to them? Oh, they did this to themselves. One bite, one drop of blood. That's all it takes in this city of sin and secrets. They're ghouls now, puppet corpses animated by something that wears their memories like a costume." His smile widened, revealing canines that were far too long. "But you're something else entirely, aren't you? Not human, not vampire, not anything from this world at all." He moved, not stepped, not leaped. Simply was suddenly 20 feet closer, and Superman's every instinct screamed threat. "Let's see what you bleed, shall we?" The man in red pulled 2 guns from his coat, massive hand cannons that looked like they could blow holes through engine blocks. They were inscribed with silver symbols that seemed to writhe in the firelight. And when he leveled them at Superman, the Kryptonian felt something he rarely experienced. Uncertainty. "Last chance," Superman said, voice hard. "Stand down. Whatever's happening here, we can..." Both guns fired. The bullets weren't made of lead. Superman could see that in the microsecond they crossed the distance, his enhanced vision cataloging every detail. Silver, blessed silver, and inscribed with symbols that glowed as they struck his chest. Pain. Not much, nothing like kryptonite's agony. But pain. Actual, genuine pain as the bullets flattened against his costume, leaving marks that stung. Superman looked down at his chest, then up at the grinning figure, and felt reality tilt slightly. "Oh, this is delightful," the man in red purred. "You actually felt that. Blessed weapons, holy instruments designed to kill the unholy, to pierce the supernatural, to remind monsters that God still has teeth." He cocked his head, studying Superman like a particularly interesting insect. "Which means, whatever you are, you're not of this world's natural order. You're an aberration. A beautiful, flying, delicious aberration." The man's form shifted, blurred, became something with too many eyes and too many teeth, a nightmare of shadow and crimson hunger. "My name is Alucard," the monster said, voice deepening into something that resonated in Superman's chest. "I am the trump card of the Hellsing Organization, the hunter of hunters, the no-life king. And you, strange visitor from another star, are trespassing in my hunting ground. The attack came from everywhere at once. Shadows with claws, tendrils of darkness that moved independent of light, and bullets that carved trajectories impossible by any physics Superman understood. He shot upward, breaking the sound barrier, and the shockwave shattered windows for 3 blocks. Alucard followed, simply appeared beside him 200 feet up, coat billowing in wind that shouldn't exist. "Run!" Alucard howled, and there was joy in that voice. "Give me a chase worth remembering. Show me what those muscles can do before I—" Superman's fist caught him in the jaw with enough force to liquefy bone. Alucard's head snapped back, neck bending at a 90-degree angle that should have been instantly fatal. His body hurtled backward, smashing through a building's wall, through the interior, out the other side, through 2 more structures before impacting the street hard enough to crater asphalt. Superman hovered in place, fist still extended, breathing controlled despite the adrenaline singing through his veins. Below, the crater stirred. Laughter echoed up from the darkness. Wet, gurgling, delighted. "Oh yes." Alucard's voice drifted up as his body reformed from something that should have been paste, bones cracking back into alignment, flesh knitting over broken fragments. "Oh yes. It's been decades since someone made me hurt." The monster rose from the crater, head twisted back into proper position with an audible crack, and his smile was manic. "Tell me, hero, are you ready to learn what this world does to saviors? Because London's hell already has a devil." He raised his guns again, and this time they roared like thunder given voice. "And I haven't had a good meal in months." Superman dodged, but the bullets curved. Impossible trajectories guided by something that wasn't physics. And 2 more slammed, into his shoulder, his ribs, each impact carrying that strange sting that reminded him these weren't ordinary weapons, weren't ordinary anything. Below, the ghouls continued their feast. Civilians screamed and died while titans clashed overhead. Big Ben's bells tolled midnight, and in the distance, something howled, a sound that made Alucard's grin falter for just a moment. "Ah," the vampire said, tilting his head. "It seems my master has questions. How inconvenient." He began to fade, shadows consuming him from the edges inward. "Don't go anywhere, strange visitor. We have so much left to discuss, and if you survive the night, well..." His final words echoed from everywhere and nowhere. "Welcome to London. Try not to die too quickly. The fun's only just beginning." Then Superman was alone above a burning city, surrounded by creatures that had been human, wearing a costume from another world, and feeling the sting of blessed bullets against skin that had stopped nuclear weapons, without flinching. And somewhere in the darkness, something ancient and terrible began to laugh. If you want to see more crossover battles and unexpected universe collisions, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character and universe you'd want to see in the comments below. Let's explore the infinite together. Superman descended slowly, boots touching blood-slicked cobblestones with a control born from years of managing power that could shatter mountains. Around him, the ghouls had frozen, not in fear, but in confusion. Their master had vanished, and whatever unholy instinct drove their hunger seemed momentarily rudderless. They swayed like reeds in a wind only they could feel, heads tilting at angles that made Superman's stomach turn. He needed information. Fast. His X-ray vision swept the immediate area, cataloging survivors huddled in basements and locked rooms, their hearts hammering in terror. 17 within a 3-block radius. The ghouls numbered 43, scattered throughout buildings and alleys. Beyond them, his enhanced hearing picked up the sounds of similar chaos erupting across London. Gunfire, screams, and that distinctive wet tearing sound, he was learning to associate with feeding frenzies. This wasn't random. This was coordinated. "Everyone who can hear me," Superman projected his voice, pitching it to carry through walls without deafening. "Stay where you are. Lock your doors. Don't let anyone in, even if they look human. I'm going to..." The ghoul nearest him lunged. No warning, no buildup. Just explosion of unnatural speed that would have caught an ordinary person off guard. Superman caught it mid-flight, his hand closing around its throat, and made a decision he'd been avoiding. His heat vision lanced out, not the precision beams he'd used before, but a sustained blast that heated the creature's flesh to temperatures that exceeded the sun's surface. The ghoul didn't just burn, it vaporized. Flesh, bone, and whatever animated it reduced to ash in less than a second. The remains didn't regenerate. "I'm sorry," Superman whispered to the ash drifting in the night air. "Whoever you were." The other ghouls shrieked, a sound like nails on coffins, and attacked as one. Superman moved through them like judgment incarnate. Heat vision, freeze breath that turned bodies brittle enough to shatter. Precise strikes that pulverized corrupted hearts beyond any hope of regeneration. He hated every second of it. Hated the efficiency with which he cataloged the exact amount of force needed to ensure these things, these people, stayed down. 90 seconds. That's all it took to clear 3 blocks. He stood in the silence that followed, surrounded by ash and ice sculptures of the damned, and tried not to think about how easily the killing had come. Tried not to wonder if that ease made him no better than the smiling monster who'd shot him with blessed bullets. The sound of slow, measured footsteps drew his attention. She emerged from the smoke like a figure from a Gothic painting, a woman in her early 20s, though something in her bearing suggested an older soul. Blonde hair tied back severely, glasses that caught the firelight, a business suit that should have looked absurd in the aftermath of carnage, but somehow seemed perfectly appropriate. She held herself with the rigid posture of someone born to command, and behind her walked 2 figures. Superman's senses identified as decidedly not human. One was a young woman with short blonde hair and a vacant expression, dressed in a butler's uniform. The other was an older man with white hair and a gentle face that didn't match the way he moved. Weight distribution all wrong, reaction time too fast, heartbeat too slow. But it was the woman in the suit who commanded Superman's attention. Not because of any supernatural element, but because of the way she looked at him. Not with fear, not with awe, with assessment, like he was a variable in an equation she was already solving. "Extraordinary," she said, voice crisp and cultured and entirely too calm for someone standing in the aftermath of a massacre. "You dispatched 43 ghouls in under 2 minutes, using methods I've never seen before. Heat projection, localized temperature manipulation, and unless my eyes deceive me, you were flying." She stopped 10 feet away, making no move to close the distance. "My name is Sir Integra Fairbrook Wingates Hellsing, director of the Hellsing Organization, and you, whoever you are, have just complicated my evening considerably." Superman's jaw tightened. "Your evening? People are dying. That thing that attacked me, Alucard, he just watched while those creatures killed civilians. If you're his director, then I am responsible for this city's defense against the supernatural." Integra cut him off, her tone sharp as broken glass. "A responsibility my family has borne for over a century. Alucard was conducting reconnaissance on a suspected Millennium insertion point when you appeared through what our sensors registered as a Class 9 dimensional breach." She removed her glasses, cleaning them with methodical precision. "He attacked you because that is his function. To identify and neutralize threats. Can you honestly claim you're not one? I'm here to help, Superman said, forcing his voice to remain level. "Whatever's happening, whoever these Millennium people are, I can..." "You can do what, exactly?" Integra replaced her glasses, and her eyes behind them were ice. "You clearly possess capabilities beyond normal human limits, perhaps even beyond normal vampire limits, given that you made Alucard regenerate from complete skeletal destruction. But you're not from here, not from this world, if our dimensional sensors are correct. You don't understand our enemies. You don't understand the rules. And judging by your earlier hesitation, you have moral qualms about killing things that look human even after they've become monsters." She gestured to the ash surrounding them. "You overcame those qualms quickly enough when pressed. Good. But here's what you need to understand, stranger. This isn't a world of heroes and villains. This is a world of monsters and those who hunt them. The Vatican has regenerating zealots who burn heretics alive in the name of God. The Nazis have an army of artificial vampires and plan to drown Europe in blood for the sheer joy of it. And my organization has Alucard, a creature so terrible that we keep him leashed like a mad dog and point him at anything we need gone." Superman felt cold settle in his chest. "You're saying there's no room for mercy here?" "I'm saying mercy is a luxury that gets people killed," Integra replied. "Ghouls cannot be cured. Vampires cannot be redeemed. They are dead things animated by hunger and dark purpose. And the only mercy we can offer is final death." She paused, studying him. "But you already knew that, didn't you? You felt it when you tried to save that woman. Felt her slip away and become something that would have torn your throat out if given the chance." Superman's fists clenched. "There has to be another way." "Then by all means, find one," Integra said. And for the first time, something like sympathy flickered across her features. "But while you're searching for miracles, Millennium is preparing for war. They have over 1,000 artificial vampires. They have werewolf super soldiers. They have technology that blends Nazi occultism with modern science in ways that shouldn't be possible. And tonight's attack is just the beginning." She turned, gesturing for her servants to follow. "We monitor this situation from Hellsing Manor. You're welcome to join us, assuming Alucard doesn't try to kill you again. We could use someone of your obvious capabilities. But understand this. If you work with us, you work under my authority. You follow my orders. And when I tell you to kill, you kill. Because hesitation in this world doesn't make you noble. It just makes you slow." Superman floated up slightly, putting himself at eye level. "I'm not joining anyone until I understand what's really happening here. That Alucard, he wasn't defending people. He was enjoying the fight, the way he talked, the way he moved. He's as much a monster as those things I just destroyed." "More so," Integra agreed without hesitation. "Alucard is the most powerful vampire in existence. He's killed thousands, perhaps tens of thousands over his centuries of existence. But he is my monster, bound by seals and contracts to serve the Hellsing family. He kills the things that kill humans. It's an imperfect solution to an impossible problem." "And the innocent people turned into ghouls?" Superman demanded. "They're just acceptable losses?" "They're already dead," Integra said. And the weariness in her voice was the first truly human thing Superman had heard from her. "The moment a vampire's blood enters your system, you die. The thing that stands back up wears your face and carries your memories, but it's not you anymore. It's a parasite driving a corpse." She met his eyes. "You want to save them? You can't. All you can do is give them the mercy of oblivion before they kill someone who still has a chance." Superman was silent for a long moment. Around them, sirens wailed as emergency services finally arrived. too late, as they always seem to be in this world. He could see the fear in the first responders' eyes as they took in the carnage. See the way they moved with the grim efficiency of people who'd seen this before. "How often does this happen?" he asked quietly. "More frequently than the public knows," Integra replied. "We suppress the worst of it. Cover stories, media manipulation. Can't have the populace panicking every time a vampire decides to make a nest in East London." She started walking again, boots clicking against stone. "The question isn't whether you'll help us, stranger. It's whether you'll help us effectively. Because right now, you're a powerful unknown in a situation that's already spiraling toward catastrophe. You can be an asset or a liability, but you cannot be neutral." Superman watched her go, his mind racing. Everything about this felt wrong. The casual acceptance of killing, the cold calculus of acceptable losses. The way Integra talked about human lives like chess pieces to be sacrificed for strategic advantage. But he'd seen the ghouls, felt the woman transform under his hands, watched Alucard laugh while civilians died. His communicator would be useless here. Different universe, different frequencies. No Justice League to call for backup. No Bruce to help strategize. No Diana to offer wisdom about fighting monsters. He was alone in a world that operated by rules that violated everything he believed in. His enhanced hearing picked up more screams. North, maybe half a mile. More ghouls from the sound of it. More people dying while he stood here debating philosophy. Superman shot into the sky, breaking the sound barrier. He'd save who he could, kill what he must, and try to find a way out of this nightmare before it changed him into something he couldn't recognize. Behind him, Integra smiled faintly. "Walter," she said to the older man beside her. "What do you think?" "I think he's extraordinarily powerful, Sir Integra," Walter replied in a cultured voice. "I also think he's about to learn that power without ruthlessness is merely potential for tragedy." "Indeed," Integra agreed. "Contact the Round Table. Tell them we have a new variable. And tell Alucard to shadow him. I want to know everything about our flying stranger before Millennium gets their hands on him." "As you command," Walter said, and melted into shadows that shouldn't have been possible in the firelight. Integra stood alone in the ash and blood, watching the distant streak of red and blue arc across London's burning sky. "Welcome to hell," she murmured. "Let's see how long you can keep flying." Superman saved 47 people in the next 2 hours. He also killed 216 ghouls. He counted, had to count. Because if he stopped counting, he might forget that each one had been a person once. Might forget the weight of what he was doing. Might start to think like Integra Hellsing, treating them as acceptable casualties in some grand strategic calculus. The ghouls had been concentrated in specific districts: Southwark, Whitechapel, parts of Westminster. Coordinated, deliberate. Someone had orchestrated this, releasing infected vectors and patterns designed to maximize chaos while stretching response capabilities thin. Military thinking. Superman had seen similar tactics in war zones, and the recognition made his jaw clench. Dawn was still 3 hours away when he finally allowed himself to pause, landing on the roof of what his X-ray vision identified as an abandoned warehouse in the Docklands. Below, the Thames reflected the dying fires of London's worst night in decades. His costume was unmarked, invulnerable fabric courtesy of Kryptonian science, but he could still feel the phantom stains of ash on his hands. "You fight well," a voice said from the shadows. "For someone so obviously conflicted." Superman spun, fists raised, but Alucard simply materialized from darkness that seemed to flow like liquid. The vampire looked exactly as he had hours ago, no trace of their earlier confrontation, no hint that Superman had essentially liquefied his head with a single punch. He leaned against a ventilation shaft, those two long fingers drumming an idle rhythm against rusted metal. "Still following me?" Superman said flatly. "Master's orders," Alucard replied with a theatrical shrug. "Observe the strange flying man. Report on his capabilities. Make sure he doesn't accidentally start World War III by punching a diplomat through Parliament." His grin widened. "Though I admit, I'm doing this as much for my own amusement as her commands. You're fascinating." "I'm not interested in—" "Tell me," Alucard interrupted, pushing off the shaft and gliding forward with movements that didn't quite match natural human locomotion. "How does it feel? Killing all those poor, unfortunate souls? The mother of 3 from Brixton, the university student from Camden, the pensioner who survived the Blitz only to fall to vampire blood. They're all in there." He tapped his temple, still screaming in what's left of their minds as you burn them to nothing. Superman's eyes flashed red, heat vision warming dangerously. "You don't get to lecture me about killing. You were enjoying yourself back there. This is all a game to you." "Of course it's a game," Alucard said, and something ancient and terrible moved behind his eyes. "What else could it possibly be? I've existed for over 500 years, strange visitor. I've killed thousands. I've drunk the blood of virgins and villains, saints and sinners, and they all taste exactly the same in the end. If I didn't make it entertaining, I'd go mad from the monotony." He cocked his head. "But you've existed for what, 30 years? 40? And you're already carrying the weight of 200 deaths like they're anvils chained to your soul." "Because they were people," Superman growled. "They had families, dreams, lives that were stolen from them." "Yes," Alucard agreed, surprising him. "They were. But they're not anymore. And the sooner you accept that basic truth, the sooner you might actually become useful instead of just powerful." He moved closer, close enough that Superman could see the red glow in his eyes wasn't reflection. It came from within. "You know what I think? I think you're not from this world at all. I think you fell through from somewhere softer, somewhere with clear rules and clearer victories, somewhere heroes can afford to be heroic." Superman said nothing, but his silence was answer enough. Alucard's laugh was like broken glass in a velvet box. "Oh, this is delicious. You're a Boy Scout from paradise, dropped into hell and wondering why your cape doesn't make everything better." He circled Superman like a shark scenting blood. "Tell me, hero, where you're from. Do the monsters wear signs? Do they announce themselves with dramatic music and conveniently terrible aims? Do they wait patiently while you save civilians and deliver inspiring speeches?" "We have rules," Superman said quietly. "Standards. We don't kill if there's any other option." "And if there's not?" Alucard asked. "What then? Do you let the monster win? Do you let innocent people die because your precious morals demand it?" He stopped circling, facing Superman directly. "Or do you compromise? Do you make the hard choice and live with the weight?" "I make the choice that saves the most people," Superman replied, "even if it costs me." "Good answer," Alucard said, and his smile softened into something almost approving. "Wrong, but good. Because here's what you haven't learned yet. Sometimes there is no choice that saves everyone. Sometimes it's just choosing which tragedy you can live with." He raised one of his massive pistols, the Jackal. Superman's enhanced vision noted the engraving, and held it out. 13mm explosive rounds, blessed silver, mercury core, each bullet inscribed with verses from the Book of Tobit. They're designed to kill things that can't be killed. Superman didn't take the weapon. "I don't use guns." "Of course you don't," Alucard said, holstering it. You have laser eyes and the strength to juggle mountains. But you felt them earlier, didn't you? When I shot you. That little sting that said, "Hello, I'm magic, and your wonderful alien biology doesn't make you immune to me." Superman's hand unconsciously moved to his chest, where the impacts had landed. The pain had faded, but the memory remained. "You're saying I'm vulnerable here." "I'm saying this world runs on different rules than yours," Alucard corrected. "Physics matter less. Faith matters more. A vampire is stronger on consecrated ground because belief has power here. A blessed weapon can harm you because holiness is real and quantifiable. You might be able to punch through reality itself. But if Father Anderson stabs you with his blessed bayonets, you'll bleed." His eyes gleamed. "And that terrifies you, doesn't it? Being vulnerable again. Being something less than invincible." "I'm not invincible back home either," Superman said. "I have weaknesses. Limits." "Ah, but you're practically invincible there," Alucard countered. "Functionally godlike to anyone without specific anti-Kryptonian weapons. Here you're just very, very powerful. And very, very mortal if the right weapon finds you." He grinned. "Welcome to a level playing field. How does it feel?" Before Superman could answer, the sound of rotors cut through the night. Both beings looked up to see a military helicopter approaching, searchlights sweeping the docklands. Not police, not emergency services. Military insignia that Superman didn't recognize, a cross on a shield rendered in silver and black. "Iscariot," Alucard hissed. And for the first time since they'd met, Superman heard genuine distaste in the vampire's voice. "Integra's going to be furious. The Vatican vultures aren't supposed to be in London without clearance." "The Vatican?" Superman's mind raced. "The Catholic Church has military forces?" "The Catholic Church has the Iscariot Organization," Alucard corrected. "Vatican Section 30. Vampire hunters, zealots, and the single most effective group of monster killers outside of Hellsing itself." His coat billowed in wind that came from nowhere. "They're also fanatical to the point of insanity. Consider all non-Catholics to be heretics and have standing orders to execute any supernatural entity on sight, including," he gestured at himself, "yours truly." The helicopter circled lower, and Superman's enhanced vision picked out figures, rappelling down, 6 of them moving with military precision. They wore priests' robes over body armor, and each carried weapons that gleamed silver in the searchlights. But it was the 7th figure that made Superman's enhanced senses scream warning. He didn't rappel. He jumped from 300 feet up and landed with an impact that cracked concrete, rising from a crouch with bayonets already in hand, long silver blades covered in inscriptions that seemed to writhe in the searchlight's glare. The man was tall, easily 6.5 feet, with blonde hair and glasses that reflected white in the artificial illumination. He wore priest's robes and a smile that was somehow more unsettling than Alucard's manic grin. Because where the vampire smiled with mad amusement, this man smiled with absolute, unshakable certainty. "Alucard," the priest said, his Scottish brogue thick with contempt. "Still playing lapdog for the Protestant heretics. Tell me, does Integra Hellsing feed you scraps from her table? Does she pat your head when you're a good wee monster?" "Anderson," Alucard purred, straightening to his full height. "Still murdering in God's name and calling it righteousness? How many innocents have you burned this month in your little crusade?" "Only the guilty," Anderson replied, and his eyes shifted to Superman. "And the unnatural." Superman felt those eyes on him like physical weight, not the predatory assessment of Integra or the amused curiosity of Alucard, but something colder, judgment without trial, verdict without appeal. Alexander Anderson, the priest introduced himself, never looking away from Superman. Paladin of the Iscariot Organization, servant of His Holiness, slayer of the unholy. He raised his bayonets, and Superman saw they were trembling, not with fear, but with eagerness. And yeah, you're something new, something that doesn't belong. I can feel it, the wrongness of you, the alien nature. I'm not your enemy, Superman said, hands raised in a peaceful gesture. I'm trying to help. Those creatures attacking London were dealt with, Anderson interrupted. By us. While ye and the vampire were playing games, Iscariot was doing the Lord's work. 237 ghouls destroyed, 17 vampires staked and beheaded, and 6 nest sites purged with holy fire. His smile widened. We do not hesitate. We do not negotiate. We do not question. We simply act. You murder, Alucard said lazily. Let's call it what it is, Judas Priest. You massacre anything that doesn't fit your narrow definition of natural. Tell me, how many humans have you killed for the crime of being bitten? How many people who might have been saved if you showed an ounce of mercy? There is no saving the corrupted, Anderson replied, and his voice carried absolute conviction. Only cleansing, only purification through destruction. He pointed a bayonet at Superman. And this one, this thing that flies and burns with unholy light, this needs cleansing as well. Superman's jaw set. I'm warning you, don't do this. Warning me? Anderson laughed, and it was the sound of hymns sung over mass graves. Lad, I've killed vampires that could tear tanks apart. I've faced demons that wore human skin and spoke with the voices of angels. I've stared into the abyss and made it blink. He crossed his bayonets. Whatever ye are, you're just another monster that needs putting down. Anderson, Alucard said, his voice dropping into something lower, darker. Even you aren't stupid enough to start a fight you can't win. This one punched my head off earlier, literally, and I'm still feeling it. Anderson's eyes widened fractionally. Then his grin became something beatific. Is that so? Then this will be a glorious test. He moved, not ran, not leaped, simply moved with speed that defied human limitation. Faster than the ghouls, faster than anything Superman had encountered in this world so far. The blessed bayonets lanced towards Superman's throat and heart simultaneously, and instinct made the Kryptonian dodge rather than tank the hits. Good instinct. The bayonets passed through the space he'd occupied and carved furrows in the concrete where he'd stood. Concrete that sizzled where the blessed silver touched, as if the holy inscriptions were acid to reality itself. Fast, Anderson approved, landing and immediately launching another assault, but not fast enough to escape the Lord's justice. Superman caught one bayonet between his palms and hissed as the blessed silver burned. Actually burned. Not the searing agony of kryptonite, but a sharp, immediate pain that made his Kryptonian cells recoil. He jerked back, releasing the blade, and Anderson's laugh rang out. Aye, the monster bleeds. It feels. Praise be. I'm not a monster, Superman growled, and his heat vision lanced out. Anderson crossed his bayonets, and the beams bent. Impossible. Absurd. But the blessed weapon somehow deflected, concentrated solar energy as if they were mirrors designed for that exact purpose. The redirected beams carved burning lines across the warehouse roof, and Anderson used the distraction to close distance again. This time, Superman didn't dodge. He attacked. His fist blurred forward with enough force to shatter steel, aimed at Anderson's center mass, a non-lethal takedown that should have put the priest through 3 walls and into unconsciousness. Anderson's body exploded, not metaphorically. His torso burst apart in a spray of blood and organ tissue, the impact so severe that conventional biology should have resulted in instant death. Superman pulled back, horror dawning, already preparing to apply first aid despite the man having attacked him. Then Anderson's body reformed, flesh bubbling up from destroyed tissue, organs reconstructing themselves, bones knitting back together with audible cracks. In 5 seconds, Anderson stood whole again, his smile never having wavered even while his body was paced. "Regenerator," Alucard said from somewhere to the left, sounding almost bored. "The Vatican's answer to supernatural healing factors. They've got a few dozen of them. Unkillable priests with blessed weapons and absolute conviction that they're doing God's work. Tiresome to fight, impossible to reason with, and absolutely insufferable at parties." "I heard that, vampire," Anderson roared, and launched himself at Alucard instead. The clash between vampire and regenerator was violence elevated to art. They moved faster than human eyes could track. Bayonets meeting claws, blessed silver carving through regenerating flesh, only to be answered by shadow tendrils that impaled and were shrugged off. The warehouse became a killing floor, and Superman realized with dawning horror that neither combatant cared about collateral damage. A stray bayonet carved through a support pillar. The structure began to collapse. Superman was moving before conscious thought finished, processing, X-ray vision cataloging occupants in the buildings around them. 17 people in surrounding structures. The warehouse collapse would send debris into adjacent buildings. People would die. He shot upward, catching the warehouse roof before it could fall. Tons of steel and concrete pressing down on his shoulders, and he had to lift slowly, carefully, using precise control to ensure nothing broke free and became shrapnel. Below him, Alucard and Anderson continued their battle, apparently oblivious or indifferent to the fact that Superman was preventing them from killing bystanders. "Enough!" Superman's voice echoed with authority that made even the combatants pause. He held the warehouse roof above his head, like Atlas bearing the world, muscles corded with effort, not from weight, but from control. "People live here, families, children, and you're going to kill them because you're too busy trying to murder each other." Anderson looked up, and something flickered across his face. Not shame, but consideration. "The innocent," he began, "are always acceptable casualties to fanatics." Alucard finished, but his attacks had ceased as well. "Oh, don't give me that look, Anderson. How many times have you torched a building without checking if anyone human was inside?" "Only when necessary," Anderson replied, but his bayonets lowered fractionally. "Only when the corruption was too deep. Only when it was convenient to your mission," Alucard said. "Just like how it's convenient for you to classify our flying friend here as unholy. He helps people, he saves lives. But he's not Catholic, so clearly he's corrupt, yes?" Anderson's jaw clenched, and for a long moment, silence reigned except for the creak of metal as Superman slowly, carefully lowered the warehouse roof back into position. Heat vision welding supports that had been severed. "I am Alexander Anderson," the priest finally said, looking up at Superman. "And I have sworn to destroy all that is unholy, all that perverts God's design, all that exists in defiance of the natural order." His eyes, blue and cold as winter sky, met Superman's. "Tell me, creature, are you natural? Are you of God's creation? Or are you something else? Something that wears virtue like a mask but hides corruption underneath?" Superman landed between them, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute conviction. "I was sent to Earth to help people, to use my abilities to make the world better, to stand for those who can't stand for themselves. I don't know your God. I don't know your theology. But I know right from wrong. And I know that killing people because they're different, because they're unnatural, is the same excuse every tyrant has used since the dawn of time. Anderson stared at him for a long moment. Then, impossibly, he laughed, a sound like bells in a graveyard. Well spoken, creature. Well spoken indeed. He sheathed his bayonets. I'll not kill you tonight, not because you've convinced me you're righteous, but because the Lord speaks in mysterious ways. Perhaps you're a test. Perhaps you're a lesson. Perhaps you're simply another monster I'll have to put down eventually. He turned to his men, who'd been watching the entire exchange with weapons drawn. We withdraw. But mark my words, unnatural one. If you prove to be corruption wearing a cape, I'll return. And next time, I'll bring Helena's nail. He walked away, his men forming up around him, and within moments, they disappeared into London's maze of streets and shadows. Alucard whistled low. Well, that was almost diplomatic. For Anderson, usually he just tries to kill first and sort out the theology later. He looked at Superman with something approaching respect. You've got spine, I'll give you that. Not many people lecture Anderson and live. Of course, not many people can survive having their torso turned to paste either. So perhaps you've got more in common with us monsters than you'd like to admit. Superman said nothing, but his hands were shaking slightly. Reaction to the adrenaline, to the horror of watching Anderson's body reform, to the realization that he'd almost killed a man who literally couldn't stay dead. Welcome to the war, strange visitor, Alucard said softly. Where the good guys are monsters, the bad guys are worse, and the only thing anyone agrees on is that there are too many things that need killing. He began to fade into shadow. Master Integra will want a full report. I suggest you come to Hellsing Manor tomorrow evening. We have much to discuss, including what exactly Millennium wants with you. With me? Superman asked. Why would? Because you appeared through a dimensional rift caused by their occult experiments, Alucard said, his voice coming from everywhere and nowhere. Which means either they were trying to summon you specifically, or they were trying to summon something else and got you by accident. Either way, they know you're here, now. And if there's one thing Nazis love more than genocide, it's weaponizing anything they can get their hands on. Then he was gone, and Superman was alone on a rooftop in a burning city, with blessed silver burns on his palms and the weight of 200 deaths on his conscience. Dawn was still an hour away. It promised to be a long night. Superman spent the remaining hour before dawn doing what he did best, saving people. A family trapped in a burning apartment building in Shoreditch. A child separated from her parents during the chaos in Westminster. An elderly man having a heart attack in Lambeth while paramedics were overwhelmed with ghoul attack victims. Each rescue was a small victory against the night's horrors, and Superman clung to them like lifelines. But his mind kept returning to the burns on his palms. They'd healed within minutes, Kryptonian physiology working overtime under Earth's yellow sun. But the memory remained. Blessed silver, holy weapons, magic. In his world, he'd faced magical threats before. Circe, Felix Faust, demons from dimensions best left unnamed. But there, magic was the exception. Here, it seemed to be the rule. A world where faith had measurable power, where the metaphysical was as concrete as physics, where a man could have his torso liquefied and simply regenerate because of Vatican, science that shouldn't exist. As the first fingers of dawn touched London's skyline, Superman found himself on the roof of Big Ben, or what remained of it after the night's violence. His enhanced vision surveyed the city, cataloging damage. 43 separate attack sites, estimated casualties in the thousands. And according to radio chatter he'd been monitoring, the British government was already spinning cover stories. gas leak explosions, terrorist attacks, isolated gang violence. They were hiding it, systematically erasing evidence of the supernatural even as bodies were still being counted. "It's for the best," a cultured voice said from behind him. "The public cannot handle the truth. They would panic, riot, tear civilization apart, trying to escape predators they cannot see or understand." Superman turned to find the elderly man from last night. Walter, Integra had called him, standing on the clock tower's damaged face as casually as if it were a park bench. He wore an immaculate butler's uniform despite the hour, and his white-gloved hands held a silver tray with a single cup of tea steaming in the morning cold. "Tea," Walter said, offering the cup. "Earl Grey. I've been told it's quite good for settling nerves after traumatic evenings." Superman didn't take the cup. "How did you get up here?" "I walked," Walter replied with a faint smile. "Or perhaps I flew. Or perhaps I'm not actually here at all and you're hallucinating from stress and dimensional displacement." The smile widened fractionally. "The truth, of course, is that I am Walter C. Dornez, the Hellsing Organization's retainer and occasional field operative. And I am very, very good at getting places I shouldn't be able to reach." He set the tea on what remained of the clock's mechanism. "Sir Integra requests your presence at Hellsing Manor. She has information regarding Millennium's activities that she believes you'll find relevant. Also, she's quite curious about your exact capabilities and origins. You've caused quite the stir in our intelligence networks." "I'm not interested in joining your organization," Superman said flatly. "No one asked you to join," Walter corrected gently. "We're offering information, context, an opportunity to understand exactly what you've stumbled into." He tilted his head, studying Superman with eyes that were far too knowing. "You've killed 216 ghouls in the past 4 hours. You've fought Alucard to a standstill. You've survived blessed weapons that would have crippled most supernatural entities. And you did it all while maintaining moral crisis and existential dread. Impressive multitasking." Superman's jaw tightened. "You were watching." "Of course we were watching," Walter said. "You're an unknown variable in a situation that's been carefully balanced for decades. The fact that you haven't accidentally destabilized that balance yet is either remarkable self-control or extraordinary luck." He paused. "Sir Integra believes it's the former. Alucard believes it's the latter. I believe you're simply terrified of becoming what you hunt." "I don't hunt," Superman said. "I protect." "By killing things that used to be human," Walter replied. And there was no judgment in his tone, just observation. "Tell me, Superman." "Yes, we've deduced that name from your costume's emblem. In your world, are there threats that cannot be reasoned with? Dangers that must be eliminated rather than contained?" Superman was silent for a long moment. "Yes," he finally admitted. "But they're rare, and we always look for alternatives first." "A luxury," Walter said softly. "In this world, looking for alternatives is what gets civilians killed while you deliberate. The ghouls don't negotiate. The vampires don't reform. And Millennium's forces exist solely to create suffering on an industrial scale." He straightened his already immaculate tie. "We're not asking you to abandon your principles. We're asking you to understand that principles applied rigidly in the wrong context become suicide pacts. And if I refuse, if I work alone, then you'll accomplish nothing," Walter said bluntly. "You don't know who Millennium is. You don't know where they're based. You don't know their capabilities, their goals, or their weaknesses. You'll fly around London playing hero while they orchestrate the next phase of their plan. And when you finally figure out what's happening, it will be too late." He picked up the teacup, holding it out again. Or you can come to Hellsing Manor, listen to what we know, and make an informed decision. The tea is getting cold. Superman took the cup. Not because he needed it. His biology didn't require human sustenance in any conventional sense, but because the gesture felt important somehow. Human, normal, a reminder that beneath the monsters and magic, this was still Earth, still a world with people worth saving. The tea was indeed quite good. "I'll come," Superman said, "but I make no promises about cooperation." "None expected," Walter replied. "Though I should warn you, Alucard will likely try to provoke you again. He finds you fascinating in the way a cat finds a particularly interesting mouse fascinating. Sir Integra will assess whether you're an asset or a liability. And the Iscariot Organization now knows of your existence, which means the Vatican will be debating whether you're a miracle or an abomination." His smile returned, gentle and somehow sad. "Welcome to the supernatural world, Superman, where everyone is simultaneously savior and monster. And the only difference is which side you're standing on when the bullets start flying." Hellsing Manor sat on the outskirts of London like something from a Gothic novel, all stone and shadow and windows that reflected the morning sun like accusing eyes. Superman's X-ray vision revealed layers of defensive architecture, reinforced walls, hidden armories, vault-like chambers deep underground, and something else, something his vision couldn't quite penetrate, as if portions of the structure existed slightly outside normal space. Magic. Had to be. Walter led him through entrance halls decorated with centuries of military history, weapons on walls, portraits of stern-faced Hellsings dating back to the 1800s, and one particularly large painting that made Superman pause. It depicted a man in Victorian dress facing down a towering vampire, and the vampire's face was unmistakably Alucard's. "Abraham Van Helsing and Count Dracula," Walter explained, noticing his attention. "The founding moment of our organization. Abraham defeated Dracula, bound him, and forced him into service protecting England from the very threats he once embodied. A poetic form of punishment, some might say. Or perhaps just pragmatic use of available resources." "You keep a vampire as a weapon," Superman said, unable to keep the distaste from his voice. "We keep the vampire as a weapon," Walter corrected. "Alucard is not merely powerful, he is inevitability. When we unleash him, targets cease to exist. It's not elegant, it's not clean, but it is effective. And in a war against creatures that heal from anything short of complete destruction, effectiveness trumps morality." He gestured down a corridor. "This way. Sir Integra is waiting in the briefing room." The briefing room was surprisingly modern. Computer monitors, satellite feeds, tactical displays showing London's infrastructure overlaid with incident reports. Integra sat at the head of a long table, her posture rigid with command, and Saras Victoria, the young blonde vampire Superman had seen last night, stood at attention behind her. "Superman," Integra said, not rising. "Thank you for coming." "Walter, the report?" 237 confirmed ghoul eliminations by Iscariot forces, Walter recited from memory. 216 by our guest, 17 vampire nests destroyed, 6 Millennium insertion teams eliminated. Estimated civilian casualties, 3,214 dead, 7,000 wounded. Media blackout is in effect. The round table is convening at 1400 hours to discuss response protocols. Integra's expression didn't change, but Superman saw her fingers tighten fractionally on her desk. 3,000 dead in one night. The number sat in his chest like lead. Millennium's objective was threefold. Integra continued, her voice crisp despite the horror of the numbers. First, test London's response capabilities and defensive posture. Second, assess the effectiveness of their new artificial vampire variants. Third, determine whether the dimensional breach they created would yield useful results. Her eyes fixed on Superman. You, apparently, were result number 3. They were trying to summon me? Superman asked. They were trying to summon something, Integra corrected. The Major, Millennium's leader, has been obsessed with occult research since the 1940s, specifically research into dimensional manipulation and entity summoning. Our intelligence suggests they've been attempting to access other realities, looking for weapons or beings they could use against their enemies. She pulled up a file on one of the monitors, symbols and equations that made Superman's eyes hurt to look at directly. These are the ritual components we recovered from one of their insertion sites. Recognize anything? Superman studied the symbols. Some were vaguely familiar. Hermetic traditions, alchemical notation, things he'd seen in encounters with magical threats back home. But others were alien even to his extensive knowledge base. I'm not an expert in magic, he admitted. Neither are we, Integra said. But the Vatican is, and according to their analysis, delivered with typical condescension, these symbols represent an attempt to breach dimensional barriers by exploiting similarities between parallel Earths. They were looking for a world with entities of significant power that could be drawn through. You qualified. So, this was an accident, Superman said. They didn't specifically target me. On the contrary, a new voice interjected, and Superman spun to find Alucard leaning against the briefing room wall. He hadn't been there a moment ago. I think they targeted you precisely, strange visitor. Think about it. What kind of entity would interest Nazis obsessed with creating the perfect war? Someone powerful, someone with military value, someone who could be studied, replicated, or, if they're lucky, controlled. Alucard pushed off the wall, his movements fluid in ways that defied human biomechanics. The Major doesn't do anything without 17 backup plans and a keen understanding of risk versus reward. He opened that dimensional rift knowing it might kill his entire research team. He did it anyway, which means whatever he hoped to gain was worth the cost. Worth trying to kidnap someone from another dimension? Superman asked. Worth trying to kidnap you from another dimension, Alucard corrected. Face it, Blue Boy. You're the perfect weapon. Strong enough to level armies, fast enough to avoid most conventional defenses. And if I'm reading your psychology correctly, principled enough that you might be manipulated through carefully chosen hostages and moral dilemmas. His grin was sharp. The Major loves psychological warfare almost as much as he loves actual warfare. You're a gift to him. Superman's fists clenched. I'm not anyone's weapon. Tell that to Millennium, Integra said coldly. Because as of this moment, you're their primary objective. We've intercepted communications indicating they're mobilizing significant resources, specifically to either capture or kill you, whichever proves more expedient. She pulled up another file. Grainy surveillance footage showing figures in Nazi uniforms discussing something while pointing at a diagram that looked disturbingly like Superman's silhouette. They've already started modifying their vampire soldiers, Walter added, appearing beside the monitor to point at specific details. Enhanced strength serums, weapons coated in blessed materials, occult bindings designed to restrict movement. They're adapting specifically to counter your known capabilities. How do they even know my capabilities? Superman demanded. I just arrived last night. Alucard engaged you, Integra said. Iscariot engaged you. Both organizations have intelligence networks. Both organizations have spies and informants. The fact that you fought the two most famous supernatural combatants in Europe and survived. She pulled her glasses off, cleaning them with mechanical precision. That information reached Millennium within an hour. They know you can fly. They know you have heat projection. They know blessed weapons can harm you. And they're already weaponizing that knowledge. Superman felt cold settle in his gut. You're saying my presence here has made things worse. I'm saying your presence here has changed the game, Integra corrected. Whether that change is for better or worse depends entirely on what you do next. She replaced her glasses, and her eyes behind them were ice and calculation. You have 3 options, Superman. 1. Work with Hellsing. We provide intelligence, resources, and strategic coordination. You provide overwhelming combat capability. We neutralize Millennium together. 2. Work alone. You fumble around London trying to save people while Millennium picks you apart psychologically and the Iscariot tries to kill you for being an abomination. 3. Return to your world, if you can. We've had dimensional experts analyze the breach. It's collapsed. You're trapped here until we find a way to reopen it, or Millennium does it for you. The room fell silent, except for the hum of computers and the distant sounds of London recovering from catastrophe. Those are my only options? Superman asked, quietly. Those are the only practical options, Integra replied. There are, of course, impractical options. You could try to broker peace between supernaturally opposed factions. You could attempt to reform vampires who are dead things animated by hunger. You could throw yourself on the Vatican's mercy and hope they decide you're divine intervention rather than demonic corruption. Her tone made clear what she thought of those ideas. But if you want to actually help, if you want to save lives and prevent Millennium from turning Europe into an abattoir, then you work with us. Not for us. With us. Superman looked at each of them in turn. Walter, polite and professional, and probably far more dangerous than he appeared. Saras, young and afraid, and trying desperately to hold herself together. Alucard, grinning and terrible, and somehow the most honest person in the room about what he was. And Integra, cold and calculating, and carrying the weight of Britain's supernatural defense on shoulders that looked too young for such burden. They were monsters. Every one of them, in their own way. But they were also the only people who seemed to understand what was really happening. The only people who might help him get home. The only people who stood between Millennium and whatever apocalyptic endgame the Nazis were planning. If I work with you, Superman said slowly, I do it my way. I don't kill unless there's absolutely no alternative. I don't sacrifice civilians for strategic advantage. And I don't become the kind of weapon you're describing. Acceptable, Integra said without hesitation. We're not asking you to become Alucard. We're asking you to be yourself, but with context, with information, with allies instead of fighting blind. And when Millennium comes for me? Superman asked. When they deploy their modified vampires and blessed weapons and occult bindings? Alucard's grin widened to something almost feral. Then we show them why Hellsing has survived for over a century. We show them that bringing a weapon into London just gave us access to it. He moved closer, and Superman fought the urge to step back. You don't belong here, strange visitor. But while you're trapped in our hell, you might as well make the devil's work interesting. Poetically said, Walter murmured. Also mildly threatening, classic Alucard. One more thing, Integra said, standing. The Round Table, Britain's Supernatural Defense Committee, will want to meet you, assess you, determine whether you're an asset, a threat, or a problem to be contained. I can delay that meeting, but not indefinitely. You'll need to decide whether you want the British government as an ally or an obstacle." Superman nodded slowly. "When?" "Tomorrow evening, after sunset." Integra's smile was thin. "Vampires on the round table prefer nighttime meetings. Democracy is wonderful, but it does require certain accommodations for the undead." "Vampires on the government committee?" Superman asked, incredulous. 3 out of 12 seats," Walter supplied helpfully. "The supernatural doesn't just fight against humanity here, Superman. Sometimes we are humanity, or what passes for it after dark." Superman closed his eyes briefly, processing. A world where vampires sat on government councils, where the Vatican fielded regenerating super soldiers, where Nazis had vampire armies and dimensional breach technology, where a man like Alucard was considered a controlled threat. He was so far from Kansas, it might as well be another universe. Which, technically, it was. "I'll meet your round table," Superman said. "I'll work with Hellsing. But the moment you ask me to cross lines I can't cross, the moment you treat human life as expendable, we're done. Clear?" "Crystal," Integra said. "Walter will show you to quarters. Get some rest. Actual rest, not hovering in the stratosphere brooding. You're going to need your strength." She turned back to her monitors. Dismissed. "That's why he was." Superman followed Walter out. He heard Alucard's laughter echoing behind him, not mocking, but genuinely amused. "Oh, Master," the vampire said. "I think I'm going to enjoy this. A hero trying to stay heroic in hell. It's like watching a fish try to swim in lava. Fascinating, tragic, and absolutely hilarious." "Shut up, Alucard," Integra said, but there was the faintest hint of amusement in her voice. Superman walked through Hellsing Manor's gothic corridors and wondered if he'd just made the best decision of his life, or signed his soul away to devils who wore British accents and smiled with too many teeth. Time, he supposed, would tell. Superman didn't sleep. He couldn't, not in any meaningful sense. His Kryptonian biology required far less rest than humans, and what rest he did need was troubled by images of regenerating flesh, blessed bayonets, and the woman in the alley whose eyes had turned red as she died and became something else. Instead, he spent the day exploring Hellsing Manor with his enhanced senses, cataloging everything within range. The armory 3 floors down held weapons that made his skin crawl. Blessed silver in industrial quantities, holy water stored in pressurized tanks, wooden stakes with inscriptions that seemed to hum at frequencies beyond normal hearing. The dungeons, because of course there were dungeons, held cells reinforced with symbols that hurt to look at directly, designed to contain things that shouldn't exist. And in the lowest level, behind walls that his X-ray vision couldn't quite penetrate, something old stirred. Something that felt like Alucard but darker, deeper, as if the vampire was merely the surface manifestation of something far more terrible sleeping in Hellsing's foundation. "You can sense it, can't you?" Sarah's Victoria's voice made him turn. The young vampire stood in the doorway of the room Walter had assigned him, her red eyes uncertain in a face that still held human softness. The wrongness in the lower levels, where Master sleeps during the day. "What is he?" Superman asked. "Really? Not the propaganda, not the legend. What is Alucard?" Saras hesitated, then stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "I don't know if I should." He called himself the No-Life King. Superman pressed. He regenerated from having his head destroyed. He moves through shadows like their doorways. And you called him Master. Not commanding officer, not supervisor. Master. Saras's hand moved unconsciously to her neck, where Superman's enhanced vision detected faint scars, 2 puncture marks, healed but permanent. He was Count Dracula. The actual Count Dracula. Vlad III Tepes, the Impaler. He's existed for over 500 years, and he's killed, I don't even know how many. Thousands, maybe tens of thousands. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. And when he drinks blood, when he kills, he absorbs them. Their souls, their memories, their skills. He's not just one monster. He's an army of monsters wearing one face. Superman felt ice in his chest. The souls he's absorbed, they're still conscious? I think so, Sarah said, and there was genuine horror in her eyes. Sometimes, when he releases his power, you can hear them, screaming, begging, millions of voices all crying out at once. She hugged herself, looking suddenly very young and very afraid. That's what I'm becoming. What I'll be if I keep drinking blood and absorbing victims. Another monster in the collection. You haven't fed? Superman observed, his enhanced senses detecting the pallor in her skin, the slight tremor in her hands. You're starving yourself. I'm trying to stay human, Sarah snapped, then immediately looked ashamed. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. It's just, I didn't ask for this. I was a police officer. I was trying to save people during a vampire attack, and Master, he gave me a choice. Die human or live as a vampire. I chose life. But every day I wonder if I chose wrong. Superman moved to the window, looking out over London's sprawling expanse. Somewhere out there, Millennium was planning their next move. Somewhere, the Iscariot was debating whether to classify him as miracle or abomination. Somewhere, people were going about their lives, unaware that monsters walked among them. In my world, he said quietly, I faced situations where there were no good choices, where every option led to someone suffering. But I've always believed that as long as you're trying to do the right thing, as long as you're fighting to protect the innocent, you haven't lost yourself. He turned to face her. You're not a monster, Saris. You're a person dealing with an impossible situation. Don't let them convince you otherwise. Saris's eyes widened, then shimmered with something that might have been tears. You really believe that? I believe everyone deserves a chance at redemption, Superman said. Even if this world seems determined to prove me wrong. Before Saris could respond, Walter's voice echoed through the manor's intercom system. Superman, Sir Integra requests your presence in the command center. We've received intelligence from one of our field operatives. Millennium is moving. The command center buzzed with activity. Integra stood at the central display, her posture rigid with tension. Walter worked multiple computer terminals simultaneously, his aged fingers moving with inhuman speed across keyboards. And on the main screen, grainy surveillance footage showed something that made Superman's enhanced vision narrow with focus. A Zeppelin, not a modern blimp or advertising. Balloon, but an actual World War II-era combat Zeppelin, painted matte black and bearing insignia that made Superman's fists clench, despite never having served in Earth's wars. The swastika, the symbols of Nazi Germany rendered in silver against darkness. This footage was captured by MI6 satellites 2 hours ago over the North Sea. Integra explained, her voice clipped with professional urgency. The Zeppelin is on a direct course for London. Estimated arrival, 1900 hours, just after sunset. One Zeppelin, Superman said. I can stop it before it reaches the city. It's not one Zeppelin, Walter corrected, pulling up additional feeds. It's 37 Zeppelins, all on converging courses, all bearing Millennium's insignia, and our intelligence suggests each one carries approximately 30 artificial vampires plus support personnel. He did the math aloud. Over 1,000 vampire soldiers, plus conventional weapons, plus whatever occult surprises the Major has. Prepared. Superman felt his stomach drop. That's an invasion. That's a declaration of war, Integra corrected. Millennium has been in hiding since 1945, building their forces, perfecting their vampire creation techniques, and now they're coming out of the shadows with everything they have. She turned to face him directly. The question is, will you help us stop them? Or will you try to fight alone and fail? I can take down 37 Zeppelins, Superman said. But even as he spoke, he was running calculations. Flight speed, heat vision recharge time, structural weak points. Give me 10 minutes in the air and while you're destroying Zeppelins, their vampire forces will drop into London via parachute and glider. Alucard's voice interrupted. He materialized from shadow in the corner of the room, his red coat seeming to drink in the light from the monitors. The Major's not stupid. He knows you can fly. He's planned for it. The Zeppelins are both transport and distraction. While you're playing target practice in the sky, his real forces will deploy at ground level and start the slaughter. Superman's jaw clenched. Then I'll be in two places at once. Alucard finished. Will you save the Zeppelin civilian crews? Yes, he's using conscripted humans as pilots, lovely touch. Or will you let them die while you stop the vampire drops? Will you prioritize military targets or evacuation zones? Will you save this neighborhood or that one? His grin was knife sharp. The Major has studied you, strange visitor. 4 hours of combat footage, behavioral analysis, psychological profiling. He knows your weakness isn't blessed silver or magic. It's your morality, and he's going to weaponize it. Alucard, Integra said sharply. Enough dramatics. Give him the actual plan. Of course, Master. Alucard purred, but his eyes never left Superman. The plan is simple. We let them land. We evacuate civilian zones using conventional military forces. We establish kill boxes throughout London using blessed weapons and holy barriers. And then we slaughter them. Every last vampire, every last Nazi. We turn London into a graveyard for the entire Millennium Organization. That's not a plan, Superman said. That's a massacre. Correct. Integra agreed without hesitation. We are planning to massacre 1,000 vampire soldiers and their support personnel, approximately 1,500 combatants total. In exchange, we save approximately 9 million London civilians from becoming ghouls or worse. She leaned forward, hands flat on the command table. This is war, Superman. Total war against an enemy that has no concept of surrender, no interest in mercy, and no goal except causing as much suffering as possible before they're destroyed. You can participate in that war using your abilities to save as many people as possible. Or you can cling to your principles while London drowns in blood. Superman looked at the screen, watching the Zeppelins advance like harbingers of apocalypse. In his world, the Justice League would mobilize. Batman would have contingency plans. Wonder Woman would coordinate ground forces. Flash would evacuate civilians at superhuman speed. Green Lantern would create containment barriers. They would work together, each hero leveraging their specific capabilities as part of a coordinated response. Here, he was alone. Alone except for a vampire army of one, a cold-blooded commander, and an organization that treated killing as casually as he treated breathing. Tell me the plan, he said finally. All of it. I won't commit to anything until I know exactly what you're asking. Integra nodded, pulling up a tactical map of London. Phase 1, civilian evacuation. The British military, under authority of the Round Table, will begin evacuating high-risk zones under cover of a gas leak emergency. Buses, trains, underground shelters. Standard disaster protocols that won't cause mass panic. Estimated evacuation, 60% of civilians in landing zones. 40% stay behind, Superman said flatly. 40% can't be moved in the time we have, Walter corrected. Hospitals, nursing homes, prisons, people with nowhere to go or no means of transport. They'll shelter in place with military protection. Phase 2, Integra continued, is aerial interdiction. You will engage the Zeppelins, but your priority is delay, not destruction. Force them to deploy their vampire forces prematurely in locations of our choosing rather than theirs. Drive them toward pre-established kill zones. You want me to herd them, Superman realized. I want you to control the battlefield, Integra corrected. Use your speed and firepower to dictate where and when they engage. Yes, some will reach civilian areas. Yes, people will die. But you'll minimize casualties by ensuring most combat occurs in areas where we've prepared. Phase 3, Alucard said, taking over with clear relish, is where I come in. Millennium's vampire soldiers are powerful, but they're artificial, mass-produced, weak compared to natural vampires. I can destroy dozens at a time once they're concentrated in kill zones. Siras will support me. So will Iscariot forces, yes. We've temporarily allied with the Catholic fanatics because even they understand this threat requires cooperation. Anderson's forces, Walter added, will focus on protecting civilian shelters and hunting any vampires that break through our perimeter. Say what you will about their methods, but Iscariot excels at killing vampires in close quarters. Phase 4, Integra said, her voice dropping to something harder, is decapitation. The Major will be on one of those Zeppelins, probably the command ship. Once the bulk of his forces are engaged, you, Alucard, and I will board that vessel and eliminate their leadership. Cut off the head, and the body dies. Superman studied the plan, his mind racing through scenarios and variables. It was brutal, efficient, and it would absolutely result in civilian casualties. But looking at the alternative, letting Millennium deploy unopposed, he couldn't see a better option. Not with the time and resources available. The civilians in hospitals and shelters, Superman said. I want to help fortify their positions. Reinforced walls, emergency barriers. Whatever I can do to increase their survival chances. Acceptable, Integra said. We have 3 hours before the attack begins. Use them wisely. And the vampire soldiers, Superman continued. If any surrender, they won't. Alucard interrupted. Millennium's artificial vampires are programmed for fanaticism. They'll fight until destroyed. No surrender, no retreat, just death. If any surrender, Superman repeated firmly, they are to be contained, not executed. Clear? Integra's eyes narrowed. And if that containment puts my soldiers at risk? Then I'll contain them myself, Superman said. This is non-negotiable. I won't participate in summary executions, even of enemy combatants. For a long moment, Integra stared at him, and Superman wondered if he'd just ended their alliance before it truly began. Then, surprisingly, she nodded. Acceptable. But the moment a contained enemy breaks free and kills someone, that blood is on your hands. I know, Superman said quietly. I'm willing to live with that. We'll see, Alucard murmured. We'll see if you're still willing after the bodies start piling up. The command center fell silent except for the electronic hum of monitoring equipment. On the screens, the Zeppelins continued their inexorable advance toward London. 37 black shapes against darkening sky, carrying death and Nazi fanaticism into a city that had already bled too much. One more thing, Integra said, pulling up a final file. We've analyzed the blessed weapons that affected you. The Vatican's research suggests that while holy armaments can harm you, their effectiveness decreases in proportion to your distance from ground level. Something about consecrated earth and gravitational metaphysics. The higher you fight, the less vulnerable you become. "So, I should fight in the sky," Superman said. "You should fight strategically," Integra corrected. "High altitude when facing blessed weapons. Ground level when using your full strength against conventional threats. Adapt to circumstances rather than applying blanket tactics." Superman nodded. It made a twisted sort of sense. Magic had rules, even if those rules defied physics. Learn the rules, adapt to them, survive them. "All right," he said. "I'm in. But I want constant communication. If civilians are in danger, I need to know immediately. No acceptable losses without attempting rescue." "Walter will maintain an open channel," Integra agreed. "And Superman, thank you. For helping. For trying to maintain your principles, even in a world that punishes them. It's refreshing. Almost naive, but refreshing." "Don't thank me yet," Superman said, moving toward the exit. "I haven't done anything except agree to fight Nazis. That's a pretty low bar for heroism." "In this world," Alucard called after him, "fighting Nazis is heroism. Everything else is just degrees of monstrousness. Welcome to the club." Superman left the command center and found Saras waiting in the corridor, her expression uncertain. "I'm coming with you," she said, "to fortify the shelters. I'm not ready to fight Master's way, but I can help protect people, move heavy things, use vampire strength for something good." Superman looked at her, young, afraid, trying desperately to remain human in a world that wanted to make her a monster, and felt something like hope kindle in his chest. "Let's go save some people," he said. And for the next 3 hours, that's exactly what they did. Superman using heat vision to weld steel reinforcements, Saras using vampire strength to position concrete barriers, Walter coordinating with military forces to establish supply lines and evacuation routes. Even Alucard contributed, though his version of helping involved terrorizing potential looters into fleeing, rather than taking advantage of the chaos. By the time sunset painted London's sky in blood-red hues, the city was as ready as it would ever be. And on the horizon, 37 black zeppelins descended like mechanical ravens, bearing death written in German and sealed with Nazi insignia. The war for London was about to begin, and Superman stood at the center of it all, alone in a universe not his own, preparing to defend a city that didn't know his name against enemies he'd never imagined. The cape on his back rippled in the evening wind, red fabric bright against gathering darkness. He took a breath, then another. Then he flew to meet the apocalypse head-on. Superman broke the sound barrier 3 seconds after launch, the sonic boom rattling windows across South London. His enhanced vision locked onto the lead Zeppelin, a massive thing, easily 400 feet long, bristling with weapons that gleamed dull silver in the dying light. Blessed ammunition. Of course. The communications device Walter had given him crackled to life. "Superman, this is Hellsing Command. Lead Zeppelin is designated Target Alpha. Intelligence suggests it carries the Major. Do not destroy, repeat, do not destroy Target Alpha. We need their command structure intact for interrogation." "Understood," Superman replied, adjusting his trajectory. "What about the others?" "Delay and redirect." Integra's voice cut in. "Force them toward zones marked on your HUD." "I don't have a HUD," Superman interrupted. A pause. "Right. Kryptonian biology, not technological enhancement. Walter, provide verbal coordinates." For the next several seconds, Walter rattled off locations. Across London, industrial districts, abandoned warehouses, areas already evacuated, kill zones, places where Hellsing and Iscariot forces waited with blessed weapons and holy water, and the grim certainty that they were about to kill in God's name, or Queen's service, or simply because the alternative was worse. Superman reached the first Zeppelin, target Bravo, and didn't slow down. He hit it like a missile, punching through the reinforced envelope with a sound like tearing fabric amplified 1,000 times. Hydrogen, they were using hydrogen, rushed past him as he emerged from the other side, the Zeppelin already beginning to list. "Bravo is venting," he reported. "It'll crash in approximately 3 minutes. Trajectory?" "Southeast of your current position," Walter responded immediately. "Acceptable landing zone. Minimal civilian presence. Well done." But Superman was already seeing the complication. Figures were dropping from the damaged Zeppelin, dozens of them, falling without parachutes, and his enhanced vision showed they weren't falling to their deaths. They were diving, controlling their descent with impossible precision, landing on rooftops and streets with impacts that should have shattered bone, but instead just cracked pavement. Artificial vampires, already deploying. "Bravo's cargo is dispersing," Superman said, diving toward the nearest cluster. "I count 43 combatants spreading across." The first vampire he reached turned to face him with a smile that was all teeth and madness. Female, young-looking, wearing a German uniform from 1945 and carrying weapons that gleamed with holy inscriptions. She opened fire without hesitation. Superman dodged, pure instinct, and felt 3 rounds pass close enough to his face that he felt their wrongness. Blessed ammunition. She'd anticipated his movement, led her shots, adjusted for superhuman speed. He closed the distance in a microsecond and delivered a punch calibrated to shatter concrete but not kill. The vampire's ribcage collapsed. She flew backward through a brick wall, and Superman was already moving to the next threat. Except the first vampire was getting back up. Her chest reformed, bones crackling back into place, flesh knitting over broken fragments. And she was laughing. "Oh yeah, Integra's new pet is strong. This will be fun." "Stand down," Superman commanded, heat vision warming as warning. "Surrender and you'll be..." She opened fire again, and this time he didn't dodge. The blessed rounds impacted his chest with that familiar sting, flattening against invulnerable costume, but carrying enough holy power to make him wince. Not debilitating, not like kryptonite, but annoying. A reminder that in this universe, faith had teeth. His heat vision lanced out, not full power, just enough to disable, and carved through her weapon. The gun exploded in her hands, blessed silver shrapnel tearing through supernatural flesh. She screamed, but it was a scream of delight, rather, than pain. "More! Give us more!" The other vampires were converging. Superman counted 27 within immediate range, all armed, all firing, all laughing like this was the greatest entertainment they'd experienced in decades. Which, he realized with creeping horror, it probably was. These weren't reluctant soldiers. These were fanatics, created for war, raised on Nazi ideology, and absolutely thrilled to finally deploy. "Command," Superman said, dodging a pattern of blessed bullets that came far too close to his eyes. "I'm engaged with multiple hostiles. They're not surrendering. They're not even trying to survive. They're just attacking." "Confirmed." Integra's voice was cold. "Millennium's artificial vampires have no self-preservation instinct beyond the immediate tactical. They were designed that way. Kill them, Superman. Kill them all before they reach civilian zones." Superman grabbed the nearest vampire, male, scarred, grinning, and hurled him skyward with enough force to reach escape velocity. The vampire kept laughing even as he disappeared into the stratosphere. And Superman had exactly 2.3 seconds to wonder if he'd just sentenced a partially sentient being to death by orbital exposure before the next wave hit him. They came from all sides, some with guns, some with blades, blessed silver that stung when it scraped his skin, some with bare hands that clawed and tore at his costume with strength that would have ripped through steel. Superman fought like a one-man army, each strike calculated to incapacitate, each burst of heat vision aimed to destroy weapons rather than wielders. But there were too many, and they kept regenerating. And every second he spent here was a second the other Zeppelins continued their advance. Superman. Walter's voice cut through the chaos. Target Charlie is deploying over Westminster. Civilian evacuation incomplete. 300 estimated non-combatants still in the zone. Superman's enhanced hearing picked up screams 3 miles away. Westminster. Children screaming. He made a decision. Heat vision at maximum power. Sustained burst. The vampires around him didn't just burn, they vaporized. Flesh and bone reduced to ash in the space between heartbeats. Complete cellular destruction. No regeneration. No resurrection. Just 27 artificial vampires erased from existence. Superman was moving before their ashes hit the ground, breaking Mach 2 toward Westminster. And behind him, he heard Alucard's voice over the comm channel, sounding almost proud. Now he's learning. Westminster was chaos. Target Charlie's Zeppelin hovered at 500 feet, ropes descending like spider silk, and vampires rappelled down with weapons drawn and faces twisted into expressions of ecstatic violence. Below, Iscariot forces had formed a perimeter around a school where 300 children and teachers huddled in what should have been safety. Should have been. But the windows were shattering. The doors were breaking. And Anderson stood at the entrance with bayonets already red with blood, holding off a dozen vampires simultaneously while his men evacuated children through the back. "Come on then," Anderson roared, blessed silver flashing. "Come taste the Lord's justice, ye abominations. Come learn what happens when ye threaten the innocent." A vampire's head came off. Then another. Anderson moved like a dancer in a slaughterhouse, his regeneration keeping him functional despite taking wounds that should have been fatal. But Superman could see he was being overwhelmed, could see the perimeter failing, could see a vampire breaking past Anderson's defense, lunging toward a classroom window where a child's face pressed against glass. Superman hit the vampire so hard it left a crater where they impacted the ground. Then he was among them, a blue and red blur of precisely applied violence. He pulled his punches just enough to avoid liquefying torsos, used freeze breath to immobilize rather than heat vision to incinerate, grabbed vampires and threw them into the Thames where the running water would do nothing. He'd forgotten. These weren't natural vampires. They were artificial. Created through science rather than supernatural curse. Running water, crosses, garlic. The traditional wards might not even work on them. "Anderson," Superman called out. "How do I kill these things?" The priest paused in his butchery long enough to laugh, actually laugh, while beheading another vampire. "Destruction of the heart or brain, total cellular annihilation. Holy fire if you've got it. Otherwise, just hit them until there's nothing left." He punctuated each word with another kill. "Welcome to war, creature. Welcome to what justice looks like when the world is burning." Superman looked at the children behind the windows, at the teachers trying to maintain calm despite the monsters outside, at Anderson killing with the efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. At the vampires who kept coming, kept laughing, kept dying and regenerating and dying again. And he made a choice. Heat vision. Maximum sustained burn. Targeting not individual vampires, but the groups of them. Areas of concentration where his thermal vision showed no human heat signatures. He carved through dozens at once. And this time, he didn't stop until their cellular structure broke down completely. Until regeneration became physically impossible. until ash was all that remained. 43 vampires reduced to nothing in 8 seconds. Anderson stopped mid-swing, turning to stare at Superman with an expression that might have been respect, or horror, or both. "Efficient," the priest said finally. "Brutal, absolute." He sheathed his bayonets. "Perhaps you're not entirely an abomination after all." "Get those children to safety," Superman said, his voice harder than Anderson had heard before. "Now." He didn't wait for acknowledgement. Target Delta was deploying over Southwark. Target Echo over Camden. Target Foxtrot over Greenwich. The Zeppelins were spreading out, forcing him to choose which zones to defend, which civilians to prioritize, which battles to fight, and which to delegate. The communications device crackled. "Superman, this is Ceres. I'm at the hospital in Lambeth. We've got vampires in the lower levels. I'm not strong enough to. They're killing patients, and I can't stop them." Superman was already moving, but Alucard's voice cut through. "Police girl, you're starving yourself and wondering why you're weak. Feed, or get out of the way and let the adults work." "I won't become a monster," Ceres screamed back. "Then you'll die a failure," Alucard snarled. "And everyone you're trying to protect will die with you. Is that your choice? Your grand moral stand? Letting innocents be slaughtered because you're too proud to do what's necessary?" Superman reached Lambeth in 4 seconds, crashed through the hospital wall, found Ceres backed into a corner by 5 vampires, her body torn and broken from wounds she was too weak to heal, and patients screaming as monsters advanced. He didn't negotiate, didn't offer surrender, just moved through the vampires like judgment incarnate, each strike devastating, each application of heat vision, surgical and absolute. 5 threats became 5 piles of ash before Ceres could process what happened. "Thank you," she whispered, blood, her own, dripping from a dozen wounds. "You need to feed," Superman said, and the words tasted like betrayal even as he spoke them. Not on humans. Never on humans. But if there's another way, animal blood, medical supplies, something, you need to do it. Because Alucard's right. You can't help anyone if you're too weak to fight. Ceres stared at him with wide, horrified eyes. "You're telling me to give in?" "I'm telling you to survive," Superman corrected. "There's a difference between becoming a monster and using the tools. You have to protect people. Figure out which one you're doing." He was gone before she could respond, shooting back into the sky where 3 more Zeppelins were deploying, and the night was filled with tracer fire and screams and the wet sounds of feeding. Walter's voice provided a constant stream of tactical updates. Integra's voice issued orders with mechanical precision. Alucard's laughter echoed through the channel as he carved through vampires with what sounded like joy. And Anderson's roars of righteous fury marked where Iscariot forces held the line. Superman became a one-man air force. He disabled Zeppelins by punching through their engine compartments, redirected their fall paths by pushing them mid-collapse, used heat vision to cut rope lines and send vampires tumbling into kill zones. And when vampires reached civilians despite all defenses, he was there, moving faster than the human eye could track, hitting harder than anything in this universe had a right to hit, and trying desperately not to think about the fact that he was killing sentient beings by the dozen. 2 hours into the battle, Walter's voice cut through with new urgency. "Superman, Target Alpha is breaking formation. The Major Zeppelin is moving toward central London. If it deploys over populated areas..." "I see it," Superman said, banking hard toward the massive command vessel. It was larger than the others, more heavily armored and bristling with weapons that his enhanced vision identified as experimental. Occult artillery, blessed missile systems, and something at the center of the ship that pulsed with energy his senses couldn't quite categorize. Magic. Advanced magic. something that made the hair on his arms stand up even through his invulnerable costume. He approached carefully this time, not ramming but scanning. His X-ray vision penetrated the outer hull and revealed a crew of approximately 200. Half human, half vampire, all armed, all watching his approach on monitors, with expressions ranging from fear to anticipation. And in the command deck, a figure in a Nazi officer's uniform sat in a chair that looked more like a throne, his round face split by a smile that chilled Superman's blood despite having faced Darkseid's Omega beams. The Major. Even through walls and distance, Superman could see he was small, almost childlike in stature. But the way the others moved around him, the deference in their posture, the fear in their eyes. This was the architect of tonight's horror. This was the man who'd created an army of vampires for the sole purpose of bringing war back to Europe. The Major raised a hand, and every weapon on the Zeppelin swiveled to target Superman. Then, impossibly, the Major's voice came through Superman's communication device, a frequency that should have been secure, encrypted, known only to Hellsing. "Guten Abend, Superman," the Major said, his English heavily accented but perfectly clear. "Welcome to my war. I do hope you're enjoying the entertainment." Superman's jaw clenched. "This isn't entertainment. This is murder." "Ah, but what is war if not murder with purpose?" the Major replied, and Superman could hear the smile in his voice. "I have studied you for exactly 4 hours and 27 minutes. I know your capabilities. I know your limitations. And most importantly, I know your weakness." "My weakness is magic," Superman said flatly. "Your blessed weapons, your holy power. I've already figured that out." 999, the Major chuckled. "Those are merely vulnerabilities. Your weakness is far more fundamental." He leaned forward in his chair, and through the hull, Superman saw his eyes gleam with fanatic certainty. "Your weakness is that you care. You care about every life, every innocent, every civilian caught in the crossfire. And that care makes you predictable, controllable, weaponizable." Before Superman could respond, explosions rocked London, not from the Zeppelins, from below, from within the city itself. Superman's enhanced hearing picked up the locations: hospitals, schools, nursing homes, the places he'd fortified, the places where civilians sheltered. "Sleeper cells," the Major explained conversationally. "Vampires we placed weeks ago, hidden, dormant, waiting for tonight. They are killing everyone you tried to save, Superman. Everyone you promised protection. And they will continue killing until you make a choice." Target Alpha's weapons charged, energy building to levels that made Superman's enhanced senses scream warning. "Choice number 1, the Major said. "Stop me. Board this vessel. Prevent me from deploying my final surprise over London. But while you do that, 2,000 civilians die in the shelters you fortified. Choice number 2, save those civilians. Rush to their defense. Be the hero you were born to be. But while you do that, I deploy the Hauptsturmführer, a vampire so powerful that even Alucard would find him challenging. He will be unleashed on Hellsing Manor, where your little police girlfriend and the humans who trusted you will die screaming." The Major's smile somehow widened. "Or choice number 3, do nothing. Stand there paralyzed by impossible decisions while everything burns. That is, after all, what heroes do when faced with no-win scenarios. They freeze, they hesitate, they fail." Superman's fists clenched so hard, his knuckles ached. "There's always another way." "Then find it," the Major said. "You have 30 seconds before my sleeper cells breach the shelters. 29, 28. The countdown continued, and Superman's mind raced through scenarios at superhuman speed. He could split his efforts, hit the Zeppelin, then rush to the shelters, then defend Hellsing Manor. But even his speed had limits, and the Major had clearly planned for maximum dispersion. By the time he stopped one threat, 2 others would have killed hundreds. 17, 16, 15. He could call for help, but who? Alucard was engaged across the city. Anderson's forces were at their limit. Saras was too weak. The military couldn't respond fast enough. 10, 9, 8. Unless. Walter, Superman said, his voice suddenly calm. Are you listening? Every word, the butler replied. The sleeper cells, can you locate them? We've been tracking them for the past 2 minutes. 12 locations, all in fortified shelters. And the Hauptsturmführer? The vampire the Major mentioned? Confirmed. Deploying from Target Alpha now. ETA to Hellsing Manor, 3 minutes. 3, 2, 1. Perfect, Superman said, and shot toward Target Alpha at maximum speed. The Major's laughter followed him. You chose wrong, Superman. The civilians die. Your friends die. You cannot save. Superman punched through the Zeppelin's hull, through its internal structure, through bulkheads and blast doors, and emerged in the command deck so fast that the crew didn't even have time to raise their weapons. He grabbed the Major, who weighed almost nothing, who felt more like porcelain than flesh, and spoke directly into his face. I chose option 4, Superman said. Trust my allies. Walter has anti-personnel teleportation tech from their vampire research. Saras has backup from Iscariot forces I redirected. And Alucard? He smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. Alucard has been waiting for your Hauptsturmführer. You didn't create a trap for me, Major. You created entertainment for the most dangerous vampire in existence. The Major's smile never wavered. Extraordinary. You learned to delegate in under 3 hours. You adapted to our tactics. You trusted monsters to protect humans. You even sacrificed your moral code by killing my soldiers without hesitation. He laughed, a sound like broken music boxes. Do you understand what you've become, Superman? In 4 hours, you've transformed from hero to soldier, from protector to killer, from idealist to pragmatist. This world has changed you. Superman's grip tightened. Where's the dimensional breach generator? The device that brought me here. Where is it? Ah, the Major sighed. You want to go home? Of course you do. This hell is not your hell. These monsters are not your monsters. His eyes gleamed. But I'm afraid the generator was destroyed in the initial breach. A safety measure. Can't have dimensional rifts staying open after all. Far too dangerous. You're lying. Am I? The Major tilted his head. Or perhaps I'm telling the truth, and you're trapped here forever. Perhaps this universe will become your prison, your purgatory, your education in what it really means to fight wars without clean victories. He leaned closer, despite Superman's grip. Tell me, Superman, when you killed those 43 vampires at Westminster, did you feel like a hero? Or did you feel like me? Superman's heat vision flickered dangerously close to activation. Sir Integra is approaching. Walter's voice cut through. Alucard has eliminated the Hauptsturmführer. Civilian casualties from sleeper cells, 37 dead, 212 wounded. The shelters held. You made the right call. 37 dead. Superman felt each number like a physical weight. 37 people who might be alive if he'd chosen differently. 37 souls on his conscience. 37 reminders that this world didn't allow for perfect victories. Take him, Superman said, shoving the Major toward Integra as she entered the command deck with soldiers behind her. And find that dimensional generator. Whether it's destroyed or hidden, I want to know. The Major smiled as soldiers restrained him. We'll meet again, Superman. In interrogation, in nightmares, in the mirror when you wonder if you're still the hero you pretend to be. His laughter echoed through the damaged vessel. Welcome to war. Welcome to reality. Welcome to the rest of your life. Superman turned away, moving toward the broken hull, toward London's burning skyline, toward the next crisis that would demand he choose between bad and worse. Behind him, the Major whispered too quietly for human ears, but perfectly clear to Kryptonian senses. They always break eventually. Always. And Superman flew back into the battle, trying desperately to prove him wrong. The battle for London raged until dawn. Superman lost count of how many vampires he killed, lost track of the number of times he had to choose between saving one group of civilians or another, lost the ability to feel horror when his heat vision vaporized another artificial soldier who'd been human once, in some other life, before the Major's experiments turned them into weapons. By the time the sun finally crested London's skyline, 31 of the 37 Zeppelins were destroyed or captured. 6 had escaped, fleeing north with skeleton crews and whatever remained of Millennium's forces. Casualty reports were still coming in, but the numbers were staggering. 4,217 civilians dead, 11,000 wounded. And those were just the human casualties. The artificial vampires had taken catastrophic losses. Of the estimated 1,000 vampire soldiers, fewer than 50 survived to retreat with the escaping Zeppelins. The rest were ash-scattered across London streets, or staked remains waiting for Hellsing's cleanup crews, or smoking corpses in kill zones where Anderson's forces had worked with methodical, holy brutality. Superman stood on the roof of Hellsing Manor as the sun rose, his costume unmarked despite hours of combat, and felt every death like a stone in his chest. Below, in the Manor's medical wing, Saras tended to wounded Hellsing personnel. She'd fed finally on medical blood supplies, and her enhanced strength was being put to use moving patients and supplies. Anderson and his Iscariot forces had withdrawn to their own facilities, but not before the priest had approached Superman with an expression that might have been respect. "You fought well, creature," Anderson had said. "You killed when it was necessary, protected when it was possible. That's all God can ask of soldiers in an unholy war." He'd paused. "I still believe you're an abomination. But perhaps you're an abomination with a soul. Time will tell." Now, watching the sun paint London in shades of orange and gold, Superman heard footsteps behind him. Not Walter's measured tread or Integra's sharp clicks. Something heavier, more deliberate. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Alucard's voice was uncharacteristically quiet. The sun rising over a city that survived the night. They'll never know how close they came to complete annihilation. Never understand that the only reason they're alive to complain about traffic and taxes is because monsters like us stood between them and other monsters. Superman didn't turn. "How many did you kill?" 273, Alucard replied without hesitation. "I absorbed 62 of them, added their memories, their skills, their final moments to my collection. The rest I simply destroyed." A pause. "You killed 341. I counted. You're a natural, really. Efficient, precise, almost as good as me." "That's not a compliment," Superman said flatly. "No," Alucard agreed. "It's a warning. Because here's what you don't want to hear, strange visitor. You're good at killing, extraordinarily good. And the more you do it, the easier it becomes. The less you feel. The more you start thinking in terms of acceptable losses and strategic necessities rather than individual lives." He moved to stand beside Superman, his red coat billowing in wind that came from nowhere. "I've been killing for 500 years. Do you know what the worst part is? It's not the guilt. Guilt fades. It's not the nightmares. Nightmares become routine. The worst part is realizing that you've become efficient, that you can end a life without conscious thought, that killing has become as natural as breathing. Superman's fists clenched. I'm nothing like you. Not yet, Alucard said. But you took your first real steps last night. You stopped hesitating, stopped looking for non-lethal solutions when lethal was faster, stopped treating enemy combatants as people who deserved mercy and started treating them as targets that needed eliminating. He leaned against the roof's edge. The Major was right about one thing. This world has changed you, and it's only been 2 days. I did what I had to do to save lives, Superman said. Everyone says that, Alucard replied. The Crusaders said it while burning heretics. The Inquisitors said it while torturing confessions. The Nazis said it while building death camps. And they all believed it too. Believed that their atrocities were justified by their goals, by their righteousness, by the necessity of their violence. He turned to face Superman directly. The question isn't whether you did what was necessary. The question is, how many necessary choices will you make before you forget what it felt like to be horrified by them? Before Superman could respond, Walter's voice came through the communication device. Superman, Sir Integra requests your presence in the interrogation room. The Major is ready to talk. The interrogation room was deep in Hellsing Manor's lower levels, behind multiple security doors inscribed with symbols that made Superman's eyes water to look at directly. Integra stood on one side of a reinforced glass partition, and on the other side sat the Major, still smiling, his hands bound with chains that glowed faintly with holy power. Ah, Superman, the Major said cheerfully as Superman entered. Come to gloat? To demand answers? To threaten me with violence if I don't reveal Millennium secrets? He laughed. Please do try. I've been tortured by experts. I've endured techniques that would drive normal men mad. Pain is just another form of entertainment at this point. I'm not here to torture you, Superman said, moving to stand beside Integra. I'm here to understand why. Why create an army of vampires? Why attack London? Why orchestrate all this death and suffering? The Major's eyes gleamed with fanatic intensity. Because I love war. I love the chaos, the fear, the way civilization's mask slips when survival is on the line. I love watching people reveal their true natures, the cowardice, the brutality, the magnificent horror of humanity pushed to its limits. He leaned forward. You see, Superman, peace is a lie. A comfortable fiction people tell themselves while they sleep. But war is truth. War is when everyone stops pretending to be civilized and becomes what they really are. Animals fighting for survival, willing to do anything, sacrifice anyone, to see another sunrise. You're insane, Superman said. I'm honest, the Major corrected. I don't pretend my atrocities are for a greater good. I don't wrap them in flags or religion or ideology. I commit them because I enjoy them. Because war is beautiful and terrible and the only truly authentic human experience. He sat back. But you? You killed over 300 of my soldiers last night while telling yourself it was necessary. Necessary for the greater good. Necessary to protect innocence. And you know what the beautiful part is? You were right. It was necessary. But that doesn't make you less of a killer. It just makes you a killer with good intentions. Integra's hand moved to her sidearm. Enough philosophy. Where are the remaining Millennium forces based? Where are the 6 escaped Zeppelins heading? North, the Major said immediately. Norway. We have a facility there. But it won't matter. You see, last night wasn't about conquering London. It was about testing London, testing your response capabilities. testing Superman's willingness to kill, testing whether Hellsing and Iscariot could work together despite their mutual hatred. He smiled. And you all passed beautifully, which means the next phase will be even more challenging. What next phase? Superman demanded. Oh, I couldn't possibly spoil the surprise, the Major said. But I will say this. You think last night was war? That was just the opening act. A demonstration of capability. A proof of concept. The real war, the war that will reshape Europe and perhaps the world, is still coming. He looked directly at Superman. And you, strange visitor, are going to be the linchpin, the variable that determines whether Millennium achieves its ultimate goal or fails spectacularly. Which is what, exactly? Integra pressed. The Major's smile widened impossibly far. To create a war so magnificent, so terrible, so absolutely total, that it will be remembered for 1,000 years. A war that will make World War II look like a minor skirmish. A war where everyone must choose between becoming a monster or being devoured by monsters. And in that war, Superman will have to decide, does he remain the hero? Does he become the weapon? Or does he become something entirely new? He laughed. I can hardly wait to find out. Superman's heat vision flickered, warming dangerously. You won't live to see it. Won't I? The Major asked. You're not going to kill me, Superman. You're going to keep me alive because you need information, need intelligence, need to understand Millennium's capabilities so you can prepare for the next attack. Which means I have value, I have leverage, and as long as I have those things, I'm safer than I've been in decades. He leaned back in his chair. Besides, even if you killed me, it wouldn't stop what's coming. The gears are already in motion, the pieces are already moving, and there's nothing you can do except react to our initiative. Integra's jaw clenched. Walter, increase his restraints. No food, no water, no external contact. We'll see how confident he is after a week of isolation. As you command, Walter said, appearing from the shadows to adjust the Major's chains. The holy symbols flared brighter, and for the first time, the Major's smile flickered with something that might have been discomfort. As they left the interrogation room, Superman heard the Major's laughter following them through reinforced doors and mystical barriers. See you on the battlefield, Superman. See you when the real war begins. The command center had been transformed into a war room. Maps covered every surface. Tactical displays showed troop movements, and intelligence reports streamed in from Hellsing's network of informants. Integra stood at the center of it all, looking more exhausted than Superman had seen her, but her posture remained rigid with command. The Round Table has authorized full military mobilization, she said without preamble as Superman and Alucard entered. The Prime Minister is preparing a public address about last night. Carefully sanitized, of course. The official story is coordinated terrorist attacks by an extremist organization. The supernatural elements will be classified. She pulled up satellite imagery of Norway. We've located what we believe is Millennium's primary facility. It's a fortress, underground, heavily fortified with both conventional and occult defenses. And it's staffed by approximately 5,000 personnel, a mix of humans, artificial vampires, and things our intelligence can't fully classify. 5,000, Superman said. The 6 escaped Zeppelins can't carry that many. They didn't arrive on the Zeppelins, Walter explained. They've been building this force for decades, hiding in remote locations, using Nazi gold and stolen resources to fund their research. What you fought last night was approximately 20% of their total military capability. Superman felt cold settle in his chest. 20%. They held back their best forces, Alucard said, sounding almost impressed. Smart. Test the enemy's response with expendable assets. Learn from the engagement. Then deploy the real soldiers with full knowledge of what works and what doesn't. He grinned. The Major really does love war. He's playing it like a chess game, sacrificing pawns to position his knights and bishops. Then we hit them now, Superman said. Before they can fully mobilize. Before they can trigger the doomsday weapon they've been building. Integra interrupted, pulling up another file. Our intelligence suggests Millennium has been working on something called Project Pandemonium. We don't have full details, but the fragments we've recovered suggest it involves mass conversion, turning entire populations into artificial vampires simultaneously. If they succeed... She paused, the implications too horrific to fully articulate. If they succeed, Europe becomes a continent of the undead in hours, possibly days. Superman's enhanced hearing picked up the acceleration of Integra's heartbeat, the slight tremor in her hands that she was fighting to suppress. She was terrified. Integra Hellsing, who commanded monsters and stared down vampire armies, was genuinely afraid of what Millennium had planned. How do we stop it? He asked. Direct assault, Integra said. We gather every available asset, Hellsing, Iscariot, whatever military eon forces the Round Table can mobilize, and we hit the Norwegian facility with everything we have. We destroy their research. We eliminate their command structure. We burn Project Pandemonium to ash before it can be deployed. That's suicide, Alucard said flatly. They've had decades to fortify that location. They'll see us coming from miles away. They'll have defenses specifically designed to counter our capabilities. Hell, they probably have traps specifically designed to exploit Superman's weaknesses. Walking into that facility is walking into a slaughterhouse. Then we don't walk, Superman said. I go in first, fast, high-altitude approach. Punch through their defenses before they can respond. Disable their primary weapons systems. Then you follow with ground forces. You'll die, Alucard said, and for once there was no amusement in his voice. They've had time to study you, prepare for you. They'll have blessed weapons, holy barriers, occult traps specifically calibrated to your physiology. You think the Major showed you everything last night? He showed you nothing. He was collecting data, learning your patterns. And now he's preparing a killing field specifically for you. I don't care, Superman said. If they're planning to turn millions of people into vampires, I'll risk death to stop it. That's what heroes do. Alucard finished, his tone mocking. Yes, very noble. Very inspiring. Also very stupid. You're thinking with your moral code instead of your tactical brain. If you die, we lose our most powerful asset. Millennium wins by default, and everyone you're trying to save becomes a ghoul or worse. Superman's jaw clenched. Then what do you suggest? We don't assault the facility, Alucard said. We draw them out. We create a target so valuable, so irresistible, that Millennium has no choice but to deploy their forces to capture or kill it. We fight on our terms, in our chosen location, with our prepared defenses. And then we slaughter them down to the last Nazi vampire. What target? Integra asked, though her expression suggested she already knew. Alucard's grin was sharp as broken glass. Him. He pointed at Superman. The Major is obsessed with our flying friend, sees him as the ultimate weapon, the perfect specimen, the missing piece in his grand design. If we make Superman vulnerable, or appear vulnerable, Millennium will commit everything to capturing him, and that's when we spring our trap. Absolutely not, Superman said. I'm not playing bait while civilians are at risk. There won't be civilians, Integra said. and her tone made Superman look at her sharply. "We evacuate the area first. Create a controlled environment, somewhere remote, somewhere we can prepare kill zones and defensive positions without worrying about collateral damage." She pulled up a map. The Scottish Highlands, specifically an abandoned military installation from World War II, isolated, fortifiable, and large enough to accommodate the battle we're planning. "You've been thinking about this," Superman observed. "I've been thinking about contingencies since the moment you arrived," Integra replied. "You're too powerful to control, but too valuable to waste. If Millennium wants you, we can use that desire against them. Lure them into a battle they think they can win, then reveal it was a trap all along." She looked at him directly. "But this only works if you're willing to trust us, to follow orders, to be the bait knowing that the trap might fail and you might die." Superman was silent for a long moment. Every instinct screamed at him to refuse, to insist on the direct assault, to handle this himself rather than risk others. But Alucard's words echoed in his mind. "You're thinking with your moral code instead of your tactical brain." "What's the plan?" he asked finally. Integra smiled, a cold, calculating expression that reminded Superman she was the descendant of vampire hunters, raised from birth to wage supernatural war. "We leak intelligence that Superman has been weakened by exposure to this world's magic, that his powers are failing, that he's vulnerable and isolated in Scotland. Millennium takes the bait, deploys overwhelming force to capture or kill him. We let them commit. Let them think they're winning. Then we activate defenses they don't know about, deploy forces they don't expect, and we turn their invasion into their funeral. Iscariot will help," Walter added. "I've already reached out to Father Anderson. He's amenable to cooperation if it means eliminating Millennium's threat permanently. The Vatican wants revenge for last night's casualties, and they're willing to temporarily ally with Hellsing to achieve it." "And Alucard?" Superman asked, looking at the vampire. "What's your role in this?" Alucard's grin widened until it looked painful. "I'm the surprise, the thing they don't see coming. While they're focused on capturing you, while they're committing their forces to the Scottish trap, I'll be infiltrating their Norwegian facility, destroying their research, corrupting their data, and if I'm very lucky, killing everyone they left behind to guard it." His eyes gleamed crimson. "The Major wants to see what humanity becomes under pressure. I want to show him what happens when you threaten my master's interests. It's going to be beautiful." Superman looked at each of them. Integra cold and calculating, Walter professional and deadly, Alucard grinning with mad anticipation. They were planning a massacre, a carefully orchestrated slaughter designed to eliminate thousands of enemy combatants in a single, devastating ambush. And they wanted his help to make it happen. "When?" he asked. 3 days, Integra said. "That gives us time to prepare the site, to spread the false intelligence, to position our forces, and to brief you on exactly what we need you to do." She paused. "This will be dangerous, Superman. More dangerous than last night. You'll be fighting at the center of their assault with limited backup. You'll have to maintain the illusion of weakness while actually holding off their best soldiers. And if the trap fails, if they break through our defenses or outmaneuver our strategy, you'll die alone in a Scottish wasteland fighting vampires and Nazis." "Sounds like a Tuesday back home," Superman said, and was surprised to hear Alucard actually laugh. "Oh, I like you," the vampire said. "You're starting to develop a sense of gallows humor. That's essential for survival in this world. Laugh at the horror, or the horror consumes you." 3 days, Superman repeated. "We fortify Scotland. We bait the trap. we end Millennium. He looked at Integra. But after this is done, I want every resource you have focused on finding a way to send me home. I'm helping you because people need protection. But this isn't my world. These aren't my wars. And I need to get back to where I belong. Agreed, Integra said. Walter will coordinate with our dimensional specialists. If there's a way to reopen the breach, we'll find it. She extended her hand. Do we have a deal? Superman looked at her hand. Slim, strong, bearing the weight of commanding monsters and defending a nation that didn't know it needed defending. He thought about the Major's smile, about Anderson's brutal efficiency, about Alucard's 500 years of killing, about Saras trying desperately to remain human while her biology demanded she become something else. He thought about home, about Metropolis, about Lois and Bruce and Diana and everyone who knew him as Clark Kent, mild-mannered reporter, instead of as a weapon deployed against Nazi vampires in a universe gone mad. And he thought about the 4,000 people who died last night despite his best efforts. About the millions who would die if Millennium deployed Project Pandemonium. About the fact that right now, in this moment, he was the only one with the power to stop it. He took her hand. We have a deal, he said. Let's kill some Nazis. Integra's smile was sharp and approving. Welcome to the war, Superman. Try not to lose yourself before it's over. As they shook, Superman felt the weight of the commitment settle on his shoulders like a physical thing. 3 days to prepare, then battle. Then, if he survived, hopefully a way home. 3 days before he became bait in a trap designed to end in massacre. 3 days before he learned whether he could stay true to himself in a world determined to turn him into something else. The sun was fully up now, painting Hellsing Manor in gold and shadow, and somewhere in Norway, the Major was planning his next move, smiling his terrible smile, and counting down to the war he'd been building toward for decades. Superman stood at the window and wondered if he'd still recognize himself when this was over. If there would even be a himself left to recognize. The Scottish Highlands were beautiful in a desolate, unforgiving way. Gray stone and green moss stretched for miles, broken only by the skeletal remains of the World War II installation. Concrete bunkers half reclaimed by nature, rusted gun emplacements, and underground chambers that smelled of damp earth and old ghosts. Superman spent the first day helping fortify the location. His heat vision welded steel reinforcements into place. His strength repositioned concrete barriers that would have required industrial equipment. His X-ray vision mapped the underground tunnel network, identifying choke points and kill zones where Hellsing and Iscariot forces could establish defensive positions. Walter coordinated the operation with military precision, directing teams of specialists who installed weapon systems, blessed silver mines, holy water sprinkler systems, and occult barriers that made Superman's skin crawl when he got too close. Anderson's Iscariot forces arrived on the second day, 200 regenerators armed with blessed bayonets and absolute conviction that they were doing God's work. The priest himself spent hours walking the perimeter, murmuring prayers in Latin and carving symbols into stone that hummed with power Superman couldn't quite identify. Wards, Anderson explained when Superman asked. Blessed protections. They won't stop the vampires. Nothing short of complete destruction does that. But they'll slow them, disorient them, make them vulnerable to our weapons. He looked at Superman with those cold blue eyes. They'll also hurt you if you get too close. Holy power doesn't discriminate between vampire and whatever ye are. Kryptonian, Superman said. I'm Kryptonian, an alien from another planet, not a demon, not unholy, just different. Anderson was silent for a moment, then nodded slowly. An alien, a visitor from the heavens. His expression softened fractionally. The Bible speaks of angels descending from on high, messengers of God bearing power beyond mortal ken. Perhaps you're something like that. Perhaps not. He turned back to his work. Either way, ye fight on the side of innocence. That's enough for now. It was the closest thing to approval Superman had received from the priest, and he didn't know how to feel about it. On the third day, Integra arrived with Ceres and a tactical team. The young vampire looked different, stronger, more confident, though her eyes still held human uncertainty. She'd been feeding regularly, Walter had reported, on medical supplies and animal blood. Not ideal for vampire physiology, but enough to keep her functional. The intelligence leak worked, Integra announced during the final briefing, her voice carrying across the command bunker they'd established in the facility's heart. Millennium intercepted our communications exactly as planned. They believe Superman is weakened, isolated, and vulnerable. Their response is extensive. She pulled up satellite imagery showing a fleet of aircraft, not Zeppelins this time, but modern military transports, fighter jets, and something massive that Superman's enhanced vision struggled to fully process. It looked like a cargo plane had been merged with a cathedral, Gothic architecture fused with military technology in ways that defied engineering sense. The Major's personal command ship, Walter identified. They've deployed their entire remaining force, approximately 4,000 combatants, 800 artificial vampires, 3,000 human soldiers, and... He paused, highlighting a section of the imagery. Approximately 200 of what our intelligence classifies as enhanced specimens. Vampires that have undergone additional modifications. Blessed weapon resistance, magic augmentation, regeneration beyond even normal vampire capabilities. Christ, one of the Iscariot soldiers muttered, then immediately crossed himself. They're committing everything, Superman observed. Why, even if they think I'm vulnerable, this is massive overkill. Because the Major doesn't do anything halfway, Integra said. If he's going to capture or kill you, he wants overwhelming force, wants absolute certainty, and he wants to make a statement. To prove that Millennium can deploy Army-level force projection anywhere in Europe. She looked directly at Superman. You need to understand. Once this battle starts, there's no retreat, no surrender. Millennium will fight to the last soldier, and we'll have to kill them all, every single one. Superman's jaw clenched. 4,000 people. 4,000 monsters. Anderson corrected sharply. Vampires, Nazis, fanatics who chose damnation. They're not innocent victims. They're willing participants in genocide. And they'll kill millions if we don't stop them here. He stepped closer to Superman. I know you struggle with killing. I've seen it in your eyes. But hear me now. Mercy to the guilty is cruelty to the innocent. Every one of these creatures ye hesitate to destroy is a future massacre waiting to happen. He's right, Ceres said quietly, and everyone turned to look at her. She stood straighter, meeting their eyes. I've been researching Millennium, reading the files, watching the footage from London. Every one of their artificial vampires was created voluntarily. They chose to become monsters. They wanted the power, the immortality, the chance to kill. Master showed me the recruitment records. They're not victims. They're volunteers in humanity's worst impulses given form. Alucard materialized from shadow. He'd been present the entire time, Superman realized, just choosing to remain unseen until now. The police girl speaks truth. Millennium doesn't conscript, they recruit. They find the worst of humanity, the sadists, the fanatics, the ones who dream of power without consequence. And they offer transformation. Every vampire in that army chose damnation. chose to become a predator, chose to serve the Major's vision of eternal war. His grin was sharp, which makes killing them almost ethical. Superman was silent, processing. In his world, the distinction between victim and volunteer, between corrupted and willing, mattered immensely. It was the difference between someone who needed saving and someone who needed stopping. If what they were saying was true, if Millennium's forces really were volunteers who'd chosen to become monsters, then the moral calculus shifted. Not enough to make it easy, but enough to make it necessary. "Show me the deployment plan," he said finally. The plan was elegantly brutal. Phase 1. Superman would position himself at the facility's center, appearing to be recovering from magical exhaustion. Vulnerable, alone, irresistible bait. Phase 2. Millennium's forces would deploy in a standard encirclement pattern, surrounding the facility to prevent escape. They'd send advanced forces to probe defenses. Standard military doctrine. Phase 3. Once Millennium committed their main force, once they entered the facility proper, the trap would trigger. Blessed barriers would activate, segmenting the battlefield into isolated kill zones. Holy water systems would flood specific corridors, and Hellsing Iscariot forces would emerge from concealed positions to engage at close range where blessed weapons were most effective. Phase 4. Superman would drop the weakened act and engage with full force, targeting command elements and enhanced specimens while conventional forces handled the rank-and-file vampires. Phase 5. Alucard, having infiltrated Millennium's Norwegian facility during the battle, would destroy their research and eliminate any reserve forces, ensuring no possibility of regeneration or regrowth. "It's a slaughter," Superman said, studying the tactical overlay. "It's necessary," Integra countered. "And it's more merciful than the alternative. We end this cleanly, definitively, rather than letting Millennium continue their experiments and deployments for another decade." She pulled her glasses off, cleaning them with mechanical precision. "I take no pleasure in orchestrating mass death. But I take less pleasure in imagining what happens if Millennium perfects Project Pandemonium, if they achieve their goal of continent-wide vampiric transformation." "When do they arrive?" Superman asked. Walter checked his monitors. "First aircraft entered British airspace 7 minutes ago. ETA to this location, 42 minutes. They're not bothering with stealth. This is a show of force, a declaration that they can operate openly in Allied territory, and we can't stop them." "Then let's prove them wrong," Integra said. She turned to address the assembled forces. Hellsing soldiers, Iscariot regenerators, tactical specialists, and supernatural specialists who looked more like monks than military personnel. "Today, we end Millennium. Today, we eliminate the threat that's haunted Europe since 1945. And today, we show these Nazi bastards that Britain still has teeth." Her voice rose, carrying command that made even hardened soldiers straighten. "They chose to become monsters. We choose to send them to hell. For Queen, country, and the innocent lives depending on our success, take your positions." The forces dispersed with professional efficiency. Anderson's Iscariot teams moved to defensive positions in the underground tunnels. Walter's tactical specialists manned weapon emplacements and barrier controls. Sarah's took position near the facility's north entrance. Her sniper rifle, custom-made for vampire strength, loaded with blessed silver rounds. And Superman walked to the center of the facility's courtyard, where ruins of an old parade ground had been partially cleared and settled into position. Sitting, vulnerable posture, head bowed as if exhausted, playing the part of weakened prey. "Comfortable?" Alucard's voice came through the communication device Walter had insisted Superman wear. The vampire was already en route to Norway, but he'd insisted on maintaining the channel to enjoy the show. Not particularly, Superman admitted. This feels wrong, deceptive. Welcome to warfare, Alucard replied, where the greatest victories come from making your enemy believe they're winning right up until the moment you cut their throat. A pause. I'm approaching the Norwegian facility now. Minimal security. The Major really did commit everything to capturing you. This should be disappointing, honestly. I was hoping for more resistance. Just be careful, Superman said. Alucard laughed. Careful, right? Because I'm known for my cautious, measured approach to combat. The connection crackled. Here we go. Time to paint Norway red. Try not to die in Scotland while I'm away, I want to compare kill counts afterward. Then silence, and Superman was alone in the courtyard, with only the wind and his thoughts for company. His enhanced hearing picked up the approaching aircraft. 32 of them. The rumble of engines, the whistle of wind over metal, and something else, chanting. The human soldiers were chanting in German, war songs, battle hymns from the Third Reich. They were excited, eager, ready to fight, ready to die thinking they were winning. Superman closed his eyes and centered himself. In moments, he would have to become something he'd sworn never to be. A weapon designed for mass destruction. He'd have to kill with efficiency and precision. He'd have to watch blood flow and bodies fall and try not to lose himself in the carnage. But if he didn't, if he hesitated, if he held back, if he let his morals paralyze him, then Millennium would escape, would regroup, would deploy Project Pandemonium, and millions would suffer fates worse than death. The first aircraft appeared over the horizon, then another, then the entire fleet, descending like mechanical locusts. All forces. Integra's voice came through every channel. Weapons free. Engage on my mark. The aircraft deployed their cargo. Vampires and soldiers dropped on cables and parachutes, descending in organized waves. Textbook military deployment. Beautiful in its precision, and completely unaware they were landing in a prepared killing ground. Superman kept his head bowed, kept his breathing steady, kept every muscle relaxed despite the tension screaming through his Kryptonian physiology. The first wave landed, 50 vampires forming a perimeter. They approached his position cautiously, weapons raised, and Superman could hear their heartbeats, fast with excitement, slow with supernatural modification. One of them called out in German-accented English, "Superman, you are surrounded. Surrender yourself to Millennium custody and your death will be swift. Resist and we will make it artistic." Superman didn't move. "He's unconscious," another vampire said. "Or dying. The intelligence was correct. This world's magic has poisoned him." They moved closer. 30 feet, 20, 10. "Now," Integra said calmly. The blessed barriers erupted from the ground, pillars of light and holy power that segmented the battlefield into isolated zones. The vampires screamed as the barriers burned them, their enhanced resistance momentarily overwhelmed by the concentrated sanctification. Above, the descending aircraft found themselves caught in the barrier network, unable to maneuver, forced to deploy their forces in predetermined locations. Superman stood. His eyes blazed red with heat vision ready to unleash. "Surprise," he said. Then the slaughter began. He moved through the first wave like judgment given form. Heat vision that didn't just burn but erased. Cellular destruction so complete that regeneration became impossible. Freeze breath that turned vampire flesh brittle enough to shatter with the slightest impact. Punches delivered with precisely calibrated force to pulverize hearts and scramble brains beyond any hope of reconstruction. 20 vampires became ash in 8 seconds. Around him, the facility erupted into battle. Iscariot forces emerged from tunnels, blessed bayonets flashing in artificial light. Hellsing soldiers opened fire with blessed silver rounds that punched through vampire flesh with holy authority. The sprinkler systems activated, raining holy water that sizzled against supernatural skin. And in the tunnels, in the prepared kill zones, Anderson went to work with the brutal efficiency of someone who'd been killing vampires since before Superman was born. His blessed bayonets carved through enhanced specimens like they were nothing. His regeneration kept him functional despite taking wounds that would have killed normal men dozens of times over. And his voice rang out in Latin prayer that somehow made the blessed weapons burn brighter, hit harder, kill faster. Superman shot into the air, engaging the aircraft. Not to destroy them, they were trapped in the barrier network, but to prevent them from deploying their remaining forces effectively. He punched through engine compartments, used heat vision to cut support cables, grabbed descending vampires mid-fall and threw them into barrier walls where holy power incinerated them. Superman. Walter's voice cut through the chaos. The command ship is holding back. 2 miles northeast, the Major's watching, waiting to see how this plays out. Can you trap him? Superman asked, simultaneously dodging blessed bullets and destroying 3 vampires with freeze breath. Negative. The command ship has mobility we can't match. If he decides to retreat, he won't. Alucard's voice interrupted. I'm in Norway, and you need to see what I'm seeing. The communication device's visual feed activated, something Superman hadn't realized it could do. And he saw through Alucard's eyes. The vampire was standing in a massive laboratory, surrounded by equipment that looked like mad science fiction. And in the center of the room was a device. No, not a device, a portal. Dimensional breach technology, active, functional. And beside it, monitoring equipment showing coordinates, readings, calculations. They can open breaches at will, Alucard said, his voice uncharacteristically serious. This isn't experimental technology. It's operational. They've been testing it, refining it, and judging by these logs. He moved through papers scattered across a desk. They've successfully extracted entities from at least 7 different dimensions. You weren't the first, Superman. You were just the most powerful. Superman felt cold settle in his chest even as he destroyed another wave of vampires. What happened to the others? Dissected, studied, killed, their dimensional signatures recorded and cataloged. Alucard's voice darkened. The Major's planning something bigger than we thought. He's not just trying to create vampires. He's trying to create an army that combines dimensional entities with vampire physiology, super soldiers that blend different universes' rules and capabilities. Can you destroy it? Superman demanded. I can destroy the equipment, Alucard replied. But the research, the data, that's spread across multiple facilities. This is just one node in a network. Destroying this slows them down, but doesn't stop the program. Before Superman could respond, the battlefield shifted. The enhanced specimens deployed. They dropped from the command ship in a single coordinated wave. 200 vampires that looked different from their fellows. Larger, more heavily armored, covered in inscriptions that glowed with power Superman couldn't identify. And they moved fast. Faster than anything he'd encountered in this universe except Alucard. One of them, massive, 7 feet tall, covered in ritual scarring, locked eyes with Superman and smiled, then attacked at speeds that actually forced Superman to go full speed to dodge. The impact when they collided shattered concrete for 100 feet in every direction. Superman's punch, delivered with enough force to stop a meteor, cratered the specimen's chest but didn't stop it, didn't even slow it. It regenerated mid-combat and struck back with blessed gauntlets that actually hurt, that carried holy power concentrated enough to make Superman's Kryptonian cells scream in protest. "What the hell is this?" Superman grunted, blocking another strike that sent shockwaves through his arms. "Enhanced Specimen Alpha 7. Walter's voice provided analysis. "Fusion of artificial vampire physiology with concentrated holy power and dimensional augmentation. They've somehow made vampires that are strengthened by holiness rather than weakened. It should be impossible." "Millennium specializes in impossible," Integra said grimly. "Superman, fall back. Let the barriers..." "The barriers aren't stopping them," Superman interrupted, watching as the enhanced specimens simply walked through the holy barriers that were incinerating normal vampires. "They're immune." And they were converging on his position, all 200 of them, moving with coordinated precision, surrounding him not to kill, but to capture, he realized. They had nets woven with blessed silver, chains inscribed with binding symbols, devices that hummed with dimensional energy. They were going to try to take him alive. "Alucard," Superman said, "I need backup. Now." "Can't," the vampire replied, his voice strained. "I'm engaged here. Turns out Norway wasn't as undefended as I thought. They had contingencies. Things that are actually giving me trouble. I'll be there when I can, but..." An explosion cut him off, and the communication link went dead. Superman was alone in the center of Scotland, surrounded by 200 enhanced vampires that could hurt him, with Hellsing and Iscariot forces engaged elsewhere and unable to provide support. The largest specimen, Alpha 7, stepped forward. "Superman, you will surrender. You will allow us to place the restraints. You will come with us peacefully, or we will kill everyone in this facility and then take you by force. Choose." Superman's eyes blazed red. "Option 3, you leave now and maybe survive the next 10 seconds. Alpha 7 laughed. "Brave words, but you forget. We were designed to counter you, specifically you. Every capability you demonstrated in London, every weakness we identified, every tactical pattern you displayed. We've trained for this, prepared for this. You cannot win." "Probably not," Superman agreed. "But I can make you regret trying." Then he stopped pulling his punches. The battle that followed would be remembered by survivors as the moment they understood what Superman truly was. Not a hero, not a soldier, but a force of nature compressed into humanoid form and pointed at an enemy with absolute conviction. He moved faster than their enhanced speed could track, hit harder than their augmented durability could withstand. Used heat vision at intensities that exceeded the surface. Temperature of stars, sustained until vampire flesh didn't just burn, but underwent nuclear fusion. Employed freeze breath at absolute zero temperatures that flash froze enhanced specimens into brittle statues that shattered when he exhaled sharply. And when they tried to net him, he grabbed the blessed silver chains and pulled, using the vampire's own strength against them, swinging them like medieval flails into their companions. 60 seconds of combat. 143 enhanced specimens destroyed. 57 remained, and Superman was starting to understand Alucard's warning about becoming efficient at killing. Because it was getting easier. Each strike more automatic, each decision to use lethal force less agonizing. He was adapting to warfare, becoming a weapon. And part of him hated how natural it felt. Alpha 7 stood among the survivors, his expression no longer confident. You're stronger than the simulations predicted." "I'm holding back," Superman said, and it was true. He was still pulling enough force to avoid collateral damage to the facility, still being careful. "But if you make me stop holding back, this entire facility becomes a crater and you all die. So I'll ask again, leave, Now, while you still can. For the first time, Superman saw uncertainty in the enhanced specimen's eyes. Then the Major's voice came through speakers mounted on the surviving vampire's armor. Magnificent. Absolutely magnificent. You've exceeded every projection, surpassed every simulation. You truly are the perfect weapon, Superman. Which is why I cannot allow you to remain free. The remaining enhanced specimen's eyes glazed over. Their movements became synchronized, and Superman realized with creeping horror that they'd been remotely activated, turned into puppets, suicide bombers. They rushed him as one, and Superman heard the dimensional energy building in their bodies, the same energy he'd seen in the Norwegian portal. They were going to detonate, going to create breaches that would tear reality apart. He had two choices: fly away and let the detonation destroy the facility and everyone in it, or contain the blast somehow. Superman chose option 3. He gathered all 57 enhanced specimens in his arms, moving faster than thought, faster than their detonation sequence, and shot straight up, through the cloud layer, through the stratosphere, into the upper atmosphere where air became thin and space beckoned. And there, at the edge of the world, he held them as they detonated. The dimensional breach tore at his Kryptonian physiology, shredding his costume, burning his skin with energies that shouldn't exist. But he held on, contained it, prevented the explosion from reaching Earth's surface. When the light finally faded, Superman floated in the thin air, his costume in tatters, his blood, drifting in zero gravity, and the enhanced specimens reduced to ash that scattered across the upper atmosphere. Below, the battle in Scotland continued. But the threat, the immediate, overwhelming threat, had been neutralized. Superman. Integra's voice came through his damaged communication device. Status? Alive, he managed. Enhanced specimens neutralized. But the Major, he turned them into bombs. He was willing to kill his own forces just to take me out. That's war, Integra said. Get back here. We still have conventional forces to eliminate. Superman looked down at Earth. Beautiful, blue-green, wrong in 1,000 subtle ways that reminded him this wasn't home. Looked at his blood crystallizing in the cold, at the ash of 200 beings he'd killed in less than 2 minutes, and wondered how much more of himself he'd have to sacrifice before this was over. Then he descended back into the battle, back into the killing, and tried not to think about what he was becoming. The Scottish sky was on fire. Below, the battle had entered its final, brutal phase. With the enhanced specimens eliminated, the remaining Millennium forces, artificial vampires and human soldiers alike, were being systematically cleansed from the fortified installation. Holy water flowed through pre-dug channels, creating moats of sizzling sanctity that trapped entire squads. Anderson's Iscariot regenerators worked in grim silence, their blessed bayonets rising and falling with mechanical efficiency. From her sniper nest, Saras fired round after round, each blessed silver bullet finding a vampire's heart or brain with chilling precision. Superman descended into this landscape of sanctified slaughter, his tattered cape streaming behind him like a banner of war. He was bleeding from a dozen minor wounds. The dimensional explosion had lacerated his skin in ways his solar-powered healing was struggling to mend. The blessed energy that had saturated the blast had left a lingering ache in his bones, a persistent sting that felt like a low-grade fever for his Kryptonian cells. He landed in the central courtyard, now a charnel house of ash and disintegrating bodies. The air thrummed with spent holiness and ozone. Integra stood near the ruined command bunker entrance, Walter at her side, their faces illuminated by the glow of tactical tablets and the distant flames of burning aircraft. The command ship is withdrawing, Walter reported, his voice calm despite the carnage. They've broken the barrier net on their eastern flank. The Major is leaving his forces to die." "Of course he is," Integra said, her tone ice. "He got what he came for. Data on Superman's capabilities under extreme duress. Footage of our defenses. He's sacrificing pawns to improve his game." She looked at Superman, her eyes assessing his injuries with cold professionalism. "Can you intercept?" Superman followed her gaze eastward. His enhanced vision pierced the distance, locking onto the massive, cathedral-like command ship as it gained altitude, turbines straining. He calculated speed, trajectory, the likely point of no return over international waters. "I can," he said, "but I'll have to go through them." He didn't need to elaborate. Between his position and the fleeing ship stood the last concentrated battalion of Millennium forces, perhaps 300 vampires and twice as many human soldiers, making a fighting retreat toward a cluster of transport helicopters. They were covering the Major's escape, a rearguard action of pure fanaticism. They knew they were dead. They just wanted to take as many of their enemies with them as possible. "Then go," Integra said. There was no plea in her voice, no request, just a command. "Stop him, whatever it takes." Whatever it takes. The words hung in the smoky air. Superman looked from her rigid face to the battlefield, where Anderson was currently beheading a shrieking vampire, to Saras, who lowered her rifle to meet his gaze with something like pity. They all knew what those words meant in this world. The line he'd sworn not to cross was now a smudged mark in the dirt, and he was being asked to step over it. He took a breath, tasting ash and blood and the sharp, clean scent of ozone from the holy barriers. Then he moved. He didn't fly, he ran. His feet left the ground only in the spaces between strides, each impact cratering the ancient Scottish stone. He became a blue-red blur streaking through the kill zones, a shockwave of motion that toppled vampires and soldiers alike. He didn't stop to fight. He plowed through them. Bones shattered against his shoulders. Bodies were hurled aside like chaff. He was a battering ram aimed at the command ship, and everything in his path was merely an obstacle. A vampire wielding a blessed claymore leapt in front of him. Superman didn't slow. He grabbed the blade mid-swing. The holy silver seared his palm and snapped it, driving the broken shard back through the vampire's chest and out its spine, pinning it to the ground. He kept running. Gunfire rattled against his back, blessed rounds stinging like hornets. He ignored them. A squad of human soldiers set up a heavy machine gun, its barrels inscribed with warding symbols. Superman altered his course by 2 degrees. His heat vision, a flickering lance of scarlet, melted the weapon and the ground around it into bubbling slag. The screams were cut short. He was not the Superman of Metropolis. He was not the hero who would catch every civilian, who would disarm every opponent, who believed in the redeemable core of every soul. He was Kal-El, last son of Krypton, forged in the fires of a universe that had no use for his ideals, and he was angry. The command ship was beginning to turn, presenting its armored flank. He could see the Major through layers of alloy and reinforced glass, standing on the command deck, watching, smiling that small, terrible smile. The rearguard made its final stand at the edge of the landing zone. A solid wall of vampires, interlocked, their bodies forming a shield of flesh and blessed armor. Behind them, the last helicopters roared to life. "Superman!" The voice was Anderson's, screaming over the din of battle. The priest was 100 yards to his left, covered in gore, one of his bayonets broken. "They're going to fire on the facility. On Integra. They've got..." Superman's hearing, strained and battered, caught the new sound. A deeper thrum, an energy buildup from the command ship's ventral array, not conventional explosives, dimensional munitions. the same unstable, reality-tearing energy that had scarred him minutes before. The Major wasn't just escaping. He was going to salt the earth, obliterating the Hellsing forces, the evidence, and anyone too slow to flee. He had seconds. The wall of vampires grinned, a unified rictus of defiance. They knew they had him. To stop the blast, he had to get through them, and there was no time for precision. Superman stopped running. He planted his feet. The ground shook. He drew in a breath so deep it pulled the smoke from the air around him into a vortex. His eyes, usually a clear, human blue, glowed with the ferocity of a red sun. He had made a choice on the way here, watching his blood drift in space, feeling the ash of 200 beings on his skin. The choice Integra had offered. The choice this world demanded. He would not let the innocent die for his principles. His heat vision did not lance out in beams. It erupted. A wave of concentrated solar fury, wide as a city street, blasted forth. It was not the surgical tool he used to cut steel or weld girders. It was a weapon of total annihilation. It struck the wall of vampires and did not stop. It incinerated them so completely that not even shadow was left on the stone behind them. It melted the landing zone's concrete into glass. It swept over the helicopters, and they detonated in silent flowers of fire and shrapnel that were consumed a microsecond later. The wall of death swept onward, toward the command ship. On the deck, the Major's smile finally vanished. He took a step back. The wave of heat vision hit the ship's forward section. Armor designed to withstand nuclear strikes vaporized. The blessed wards carved into its hull flared bright white and shattered. The dimensional cannon, still charging, detonated prematurely in a silent, shimmering tear of multicolored light that was instantly swallowed by the solar inferno. Superman cut off the energy flow. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the crackle of cooling glass and the distant moans of the dying. Where the command ship had been, there was a half-molten skeleton of metal falling from the sky. It crashed into the highlands with a final, earth-shaking thud, throwing up a plume of dirt and flame. The Major was gone, not dead. Superman's X-ray vision scanned the wreckage instantly, finding no body, no heat signature. He had escaped somehow. A last-minute teleportation, a hidden pod, something. But his army, his command, his immediate threat was over. Superman stood amid the devastation he had wrought. The landing zone was a smooth, glassy crater. The vampires were atoms on the wind. The human soldiers who had stood with them were simply gone. He heard the footsteps behind him before the voice. "So," Alucard said. Superman didn't turn. He stared at the burning wreckage of the command ship. "Norway?" "Handled. The facility is a ruin. The research is corrupted. And I had a lovely time." Alucard's tone was light, but there was a new note in it, something like recognition. He moved to stand beside Superman, following his gaze. "You killed them all?" "Yes. Every last one in your path. They were in the way." Alucard was silent for a long moment. The red glow from the fires painted his pale face in hellish shades. "I told you this world would change you. I didn't think it would happen this fast." He didn't sound mocking. He sounded resigned. "Welcome to the other side of the line, Superman. How does it feel?" Superman finally looked at him. "It feels like I failed." "No," Alucard said softly. "Failure would have been letting that ship fire. Letting Integra and the police girl and even that irritating priest die because you wanted to keep your hands clean. You chose. That's what soldiers do. That's what monsters do. That's what the people who get things done in this world have to do." He clapped a hand on Superman's shoulder. The grip was surprisingly solid. "The tragedy isn't that you did it. The tragedy is that it was the right thing to do. Integra, Walter, and Ceres approached, picking their way through the devastation. Anderson and a contingent of his regenerators followed, their holy weapons still dripping with black blood. They all stopped a respectful distance away, taking in the glassy crater, the utter finality of the scene. Integra's eyes met Superman's. She gave a single, slow nod. Approval, gratitude, and sorrow. Walter cleared his throat. Casualty reports are coming in. Our losses are significant, but manageable. Millennium's field forces have been eradicated as a cohesive threat. The Major's survival is a concern, but without his army and his primary research base, he will be a fugitive, not a warlord. And Project Pandemonium? Superman asked, his voice hoarse. The core data in Norway is destroyed, Alucard confirmed. Any backups will be scattered, incomplete. The immediate threat is over. Anderson strode forward, stopping at the edge of the glassed crater. He looked at the destruction, then at Superman. For a long time, he said nothing. Then he nodded, once. You did what needed doing. The Lord works in mysterious ways, and sometimes his instruments are unexpected. He turned to his men. Gather our dead, purify the area. We leave within the hour. As the Iscariot forces moved to obey, Ceres stepped closer to Superman. She looked at his torn costume, the slowly healing burns, the ash smudged on his face. You saved us, she said simply. Thank you. Superman looked at his hands. They were clean. There was no blood. The heat vision had been too absolute, too pure in its destruction. He had killed hundreds, maybe thousands today, and his hands were clean. That was the most horrifying part. I need to go, he said, not to anyone in particular. Go where? Integra asked. Away. I need to think. He didn't wait for permission. He pushed off the ground, rising slowly at first, then accelerating up through the smoke and cloud cover, leaving the burning highlands, the dead, and the living, who now looked at him, not with awe, but with the wary respect owed to a natural disaster that had for once been on their side. He flew north, over the dark, choppy waters of the North Sea, until he found a barren, icy rock of an island, devoid of life or light. He landed, alone under the indifferent stars of a foreign universe. Superman of Krypton finally let himself feel the weight of the day. He had crossed the line. He had wielded his power not to protect or to save, but to annihilate. He had made the calculation Integra had taught him, the necessary sacrifice, the acceptable loss, and enacted it with breathtaking efficiency. He had become the weapon the Major had seen, the monster Alucard had recognized, the soldier Anderson could respect. And it had worked. The battle was won. The greater evil was thwarted. So why did he feel like he had lost something far more important than a battle? Why did the clean, empty feeling in his hands make him want to scream? He looked up at the unfamiliar constellations. Somewhere in the infinite tapestry of the multiverse, his Earth was out there. A world with rules, with a Justice League, with a life where Clark Kent could believe in second chances and happy endings. Could he ever go back to that man? Could he sit across from Lois at a diner? Could he stand beside Batman on a rooftop? Could he be that symbol of hope, knowing what he had done here? Knowing what he had chosen to become? The wind howled across the barren rock, a lonely sound. It carried no answers. Superman, the last son of Krypton, sat down on the cold stone, dropped his head into his clean hands, and wondered if, in saving this world, he had damned himself. He didn't know how long he sat there on that barren rock. Time, for a Kryptonian under a yellow sun, was a fluid thing. especially when measured in heartbeats heavy with regret. The stars wheeled overhead, but they were not his stars. The silence was not the comforting quiet of the Arctic, but the hollow stillness of a world where he did not belong. The communication device on his wrist, cracked and half-melted, finally sputtered to life. It was Walter's voice, strained through static. "Superman, please respond." He stared at the device for 3 full cycles of his slowed breathing. The part of him that was still Clark Kent, the part that answered calls for help, won out. He tapped it. "I'm here. Sir Integra requests your immediate return to Hellsing Manor." A pause. "It's not an order. It's a matter of urgent discovery regarding your means of departure." The words cut through the fog of his introspection like a laser. Departure. Home. He was on his feet in an instant, the ice beneath him cracking from the sudden movement. "I'm on my way." The flight back to London was a blur. He didn't process the darkened countryside or the city lights glittering below like scattered jewels on black velvet. His mind was a single, focused line. A way home. An escape from this moral quagmire, a return to a universe with rules he understood, where his choices weren't between bad and worse, but between right and wrong. Hellsing Manor felt different. The Gothic grandeur was still there, the shadows still deep. But the atmosphere had shifted from a fortress at war to a command center in the uneasy aftermath. The staff moved with purpose, but the frantic energy was gone, replaced by a weary, solemn efficiency. He was met not by Walter, but by Seras Victoria. She looked stronger, the hollows under her eyes less pronounced, but her expression was unreadable. "They're in the secure archive," she said, turning to lead him down a corridor he hadn't seen before. Master Alucard brought back things from Norway, data crystals, hard copies, things that survived his... She searched for a word, enthusiastic cleansing. "And they found something," Superman stated. "Master thinks so. Sir Integra is hopeful, cautiously." Seras glanced at him. "You look like hell." "I feel like it." The secure archive was a vault lined with lead and other, more esoteric metals that interfered with his vision. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of ozone and old paper. Integra stood at a central table, covered with crystalline data slabs and schematics printed on thick, durable plastic. Alucard leaned against a wall of bookcases containing texts bound in what looked like human skin, idly examining his claws. Walter was the one bent over the table, a magnifying headset over his eyes, his fingers tracing lines on a particularly complex schematic. "Superman." Integra acknowledged him with a nod. Alucard recovered the primary research logs from Millennium's Dimensional Physics Division. "It seems the breach that brought you here was not their first attempt, nor was it an accident." She gestured to the table. Walter straightened up, removing his headset. "They were calibrating their equipment," the butler explained, "trying to punch through to a specific vibrational frequency, a universe they designated Prime Alpha. Their intelligence, gathered from previous, smaller breaches, suggested it was a reality rich with powerful singular energy signatures. Yours." "They were hunting for me," Superman said, the realization settling cold in his gut. "Or something like you," Alucard chimed in, pushing off the wall. "A being of immense physical power, yet bound by a discernible moral code. A controllable weapon. They hit the jackpot with you, really. The perfect test subject. The logs indicate the breach generator was not destroyed." Walter continued, tapping a data crystal. "That was misinformation from the Major, likely to discourage escape attempts. The device is a massive, fixed installation. It requires tremendous power and specific coordinates to activate. But it exists, and we have its location. Superman's heart, which had felt like a stone in his chest for hours, gave a tentative thump of hope. Where? The Black Forest, Integra said. Germany, buried under what was once a Wewelsburg castle annex, heavily fortified even now. The Major may have fled there. It's a trap, Alucard said cheerfully. Obviously, he knows we have this data. He knows you want to go home. He'll be waiting, with whatever nasty surprises he's managed to cobble together from the scraps of his empire. Probably more of those enhanced specimens, maybe some dimensional horrors he's kept in storage. It'll be a grand finale. Superman looked at the schematics. The machine was monstrously complex, a blend of arcane symbols and hyper-advanced quantum physics. It was a door, a way out. I don't care if it's a trap. We didn't think you would, Integra said quietly. She folded her arms. Hellsing will support this operation. We will provide transport, tactical overwatch, and neutralize any conventional forces. Iscariot has also been persuaded to assist. Anderson believes ensuring your departure is a form of purging an unnatural element from God's creation. His words, not mine. And me? Alucard asked, grinning. I'll come along to make sure the party doesn't get boring. And to say a proper goodbye to the Major, if he's there. Our last conversation was so rudely interrupted. Superman looked at them. The unflappable commander, the deadly gentleman, the ancient monster, and the young vampire hovering in the doorway, trying to be brave. They were monsters. They were killers. They represented everything about this world that had forced him to compromise, to bend, to break. They were also, he realized with a painful clarity, the only allies he had. Thank you, he said, the words feeling inadequate. Don't thank us yet, Integra said. We're not doing this out of altruism. Your presence destabilizes the precarious balance of power in this world. Your departure restores it. This is as much for our benefit as yours. She allowed the ghost of a smile. But I would be lying if I said I won't miss having that much power on our side. The plan was simple, which, as Walter dryly noted, was the only kind of plan that had a chance against the Major's Byzantine contingencies. A direct, overwhelming assault on the Wewelsburg facility. Iscariot would breach the perimeter. Hellsing forces would clear and hold the interior. Alucard would be the spearhead, targeting the Major directly. And Superman would make for the dimensional generator, protect the technicians Walter would bring to operate it, and be ready to depart the moment the breach was stabilized. They departed under cover of darkness 2 nights later. The flight over the Channel and into Germany was made in a modified Hellsing aircraft, its holds packed with soldiers, blessed ordnance, and a palpable tension. No one spoke much. Anderson spent the time sharpening his bayonets and praying. Siras checked and rechecked her rifle. Alucard seemed to be asleep, or at least pretending to be. Integra and Walter reviewed schematics in low tones. Superman sat apart, looking out the window at the clouds below. He thought of Lois, of his parents in Smallville, of the Daily Planet bullpen, of the feeling of the sun on his face over Metropolis, a sun that felt like his sun. He thought of the glassy crater in Scotland and the empty feeling in his hands. The announcement came from the cockpit. 5 minutes to drop zone. Iscariot forces, prepare for initial deployment. Anderson stood, his regenerators rising with him like a single organism. He caught Superman's eye and gave that single grim nod again. For the innocent, he said. For the innocent, Superman echoed. The rear ramp hissed open, and the Iscariot soldiers, fearless and fanatical, leapt out into the night sky without parachutes, trusting in their regeneration and their god to see them to the ground. Explosions and tracer fire began to light up the forest below moments later. Then it was their turn. The Hellsing aircraft swept in low. "Go," Integra commanded. Superman shot out first, a red and blue streak. Alucard flowed into shadow and vanished. Siras, Walter, and the Hellsing assault teams fast-roped down. The facility was exactly as the schematics had shown. A brutalist concrete bunker complex built into a forested hillside, disguised as an abandoned geological survey station. But the defenses were active. Automated turrets firing blessed rounds, vampire sentries with enhanced senses, occult barriers that shimmered in the night air. It was also clearly a tomb. The Major had committed his last resources here. The fighting was immediate and fierce. Iscariot clashed with vampire squads in the trenches. Hellsing forces breached blast doors with shaped charges. Alucard's laughter echoed from deep within, punctuated by screams and the wet sounds of dismemberment. Superman plowed through it all. He was a targeting beacon, drawing fire, absorbing it, and eliminating the sources with brutal, economical efficiency. He was not the brooding figure on the rock anymore. He was a soldier completing his final mission. The path to the generator core was a straight line, and he carved it through steel, concrete, and flesh. He found the chamber at the heart of the mountain. It was vast, cathedral-like, dominated by the dimensional generator. It looked like a mad artist's rendition of a particle accelerator, all coiled golden conduits, crystalline focusing arrays, and platforms inscribed with glowing runes that hurt to look at. At its center was a swirling vortex of non-light, a hole in reality that hummed with a frequency that vibrated in his teeth. And standing on a gantry overlooking it all was the Major. He looked smaller than ever, dwarfed by his machine. He was alone. He held a simple remote control in one hand. "Superman," he called out, his voice amplified. "You came. I knew you would. The prisoner always returns to the scene of the crime, hoping to find the door left open." Superman landed on the gantry, keeping distance between them. "It's over, Major. Your army is gone. Your research is destroyed." "Is it?" The Major smiled. "This machine is my research, my life's work, and you are its greatest success, a being of unimaginable power, drawn from another reality, tested in the crucible of war, and forged into a more effective instrument." He gestured with the remote. "This activates the final sequence. It will open a breach not to your world, but to dozens, a cascade failure. This region of Germany will become a soup of conflicting physical laws. It will be beautiful chaos." "You'll die too," Superman said, taking a step forward. "I am a soldier. I have lived for war. To die in the greatest war of all, a war between realities, would be a fitting end." His smile was beatific. "But you won't let me, will you? Because if I do, I take this world with me. Millions of innocents, your friends." He chuckled. "The dilemma I built for you from the start. To save one world, you must condemn yourself to another. Or to save yourself, you must allow a world to die. Which is it, Superman? The hero or the man?" It was the same choice. The choice of Scotland, the fundamental poison of this universe. Superman's eyes flicked to the swirling vortex. He could hear the battle raging outside, the shouts of Anderson, the roar of Siras's rifle, Alucard's distant, joyful killing. He thought of Integra's cold courage, Walter's quiet loyalty, Siras's struggle to remain human. They were flawed, brutal, compromised. But they were fighting for their world. He thought of his own. He made his decision. "Walter," he said, speaking into his comms, I need the generator prepped for a single coordinated breach to my home dimension, now. We're working on it. Walter's voice came back, strained. The controls are heavily encrypted. We need time. You don't have time, the Major sang. He raised the remote, his thumb poised over a large red button. Superman moved, but not toward the Major. He shot toward the heart of the machine, toward the swirling vortex. His heat vision, focused to a needle point, lanced out. Not at the Major, not at the remote. At the delicate golden conduits feeding energy into the stabilization array around the vortex. "What are you doing?" the Major screamed, his composure shattering. "You'll destabilize it. You'll kill us, all." "I'm not playing your game anymore," Superman growled, slicing through another conduit. The vortex flickered, the hum becoming a shriek. "You built a door. I'm slamming it shut." "No." The Major pressed the button. Nothing happened. The cascade failure sequence required stable energy feeds. Superman was systematically severing them. With a roar of pure, infantile rage, the Major threw the remote aside and drew a sidearm, a small, elegant pistol. He fired at Superman. The blessed rounds pinged harmlessly off his back. Superman severed the final primary conduit. The vortex pulsed violently, shrinking, stretching, reality groaning around it. "It's collapsing," Walter yelled. "The energy is feedbacking. Superman, get clear!" But Superman wasn't done. He turned from the machine and faced the Major. The little Nazi stood there, trembling, his grand design, his beautiful war, crumbling around him. The hatred in his eyes was the only pure thing about him. "You lose," Superman said. Then Alucard was there. He materialized from a shadow on the gantry, his form towering, his eyes burning like hellfire. He looked from the collapsing machine to the Major. "Leaving without saying goodbye, Herr Major?" The Major stared at Alucard, and for the first time, Superman saw genuine fear on his face. Not fear of death, but fear of him, of the monster he could not understand, could not control, and could not outlive. "Take him," Superman said. "This world's justice is yours." Alucard's grin was a gash of pure night. "With pleasure." As Alucard advanced on the cowering Major, Superman turned back to the vortex. It was now a small, desperate whirlpool of reality, pulling at the very light in the room. Through the chaotic energy, for a fleeting second, he thought he saw a familiar skyline, a flash of a blue earth. Home. Walter's voice was frantic. "Superman, we've routed emergency power. We can stabilize a micro-breach for exactly 3.2 seconds. It's now or never. Coordinates locked." It was the only chance. A tiny, fragile window back to everything he knew and loved. He took one last look at this world, at Alucard enveloping the screaming Major in darkness, at the chamber that represented the pinnacle of its cruel, logical madness. He thought of the choices he'd made, the lines he'd crossed, the blood on his conscience that would never truly wash off. He hoped somehow that he had done more good than harm, that he had left some fragment of hope in this universe of monsters. "Superman, now!" He didn't hesitate. He flew straight into the heart of the collapsing vortex, into the tear between worlds, aiming for that fleeting glimpse of blue. There was no sound, no light, only a terrible, stretching pressure, and the feeling of being unmade and remade. Then there was sun. He tumbled out of the air 10,000 feet above the Atlantic, the familiar scent of salt and the rightness of his sun washing over him. To the east, the coastline of North America was a smudge on the horizon. His hearing, attuned to this reality, instantly caught the familiar frequencies: satellite transmissions, radio broadcasts, the distant hum of metropolis. He was home. He hung in the air, letting the solar energy heal his remaining wounds, feeling the last echoes of the dimensional distortion fade from his cells. The weight was still there. The memory of Scotland, of the Major's smile, of Alucard's knowing gaze. It was a scar on his soul. But it was his soul again. He was in a world where that weight meant something, where the choices weren't pre-corrupted. He turned and flew, not toward Metropolis, but toward Kansas. He needed to see fields that didn't hold blood. He needed to hear a voice that spoke of hope without irony. As he flew, he knew the nightmares would come, the faces of those he'd erased, the feeling of absolute efficient power, the terrifying ease of it. But he also knew this. In a universe of infinite choices, he had chosen, in the end, to save both worlds. He had refused the Major's final, poisoned dilemma. He had destroyed the door, but not before using it to come home. He had left that dark world to its own devices, its own monsters, and its own fragile, hard-won peace. He was Superman, and he was damaged. And he was back. He flew into the sunrise, toward a world that still believed in heroes, determined to be worthy of that belief once more. The sun rises over a quiet farm in Kansas, painting the fields in gold. Inside a simple farmhouse, a man who is both more and less than human stares into a mug of cooling coffee. The memories of another world cling to him like the scent of smoke and sanctified ash. He remembers the glassy crater, the Major's mad smile, the feel of blessed silver against his skin, and the profound, unsettling respect in a monster's crimson eyes. He is home, but he knows a part of him will forever be in that darker, grimmer universe, fighting a war without end. Across the infinite tapestry of realities, the balance has shifted. In the Hellsing Universe, a great silence falls. Millennium is broken, its master consumed by the very darkness he sought to command. Sir Integra Fairbrook Wingate's Hellsing surveys a world momentarily free of apocalypse, the weight of command a little lighter, but the knowledge of what it cost etched a little deeper. Alucard rests in the depths of his manor, sated for now, the taste of final victory and a worthy opponent's fear a rare vintage. Siras Victoria tends to her duties, no longer just a frightened girl, but a soldier who has stared into the abyss and not entirely blinked. And Father Anderson offers prayers for the fallen, his crusade eternal, his convictions unshaken, but his understanding of God's instruments forever broadened. Superman saved their world. But the true conflict was never about strength. It was a philosophical collision, a test of an ideal in a universe with no use for it. He arrived as a paragon of hope and was forced to become a weapon of necessity. He learned that in some realities, mercy is a fatal flaw, and that protecting the innocent sometimes requires becoming what they fear. He crossed lines he swore he never would, and in doing so, prevented a greater evil. The victory is his, but it is a victory stained with the hard, pragmatic grime of a world that trades in souls and sanctified bullets. He leaves behind a legacy not of unblemished heroism, but of terrifying, effective power. A lesson and a warning that will echo in the halls of Hellsing and Iscariot for generations. And as Clark Kent finally takes a sip of his coffee, feeling the warm, right sun of his Earth on his face through the window, he understands the final, haunting truth. The multiverse is not just a collection of worlds. It is a mirror. In one, he is a symbol. In another, he became a soldier. The reflection changes, but the core remains. The choice to fight, to protect, and to carry the cost. He is back where he belongs, but he is irrevocably changed. A hero who has walked through a hell not his own and returned with the embers still glowing in his eyes. The scar on his soul is the price of the infinite, and it is a price he will bear. a silent testament to the wars fought in the shadows between the stars, and the man who fought in them without losing himself completely.